The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was between conference calls. Subject line: Westlake High 10-year reunion. Save the date. My finger hovered over the delete button before curiosity got the better of me. Opening it unleashed a flood of memories I'd carefully compartmentalized for a decade. Names and faces I'd deliberately forgotten. Hallways I'd navigated with my head down. A cafeteria where I'd eaten alone more times than I could count. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I'm Jasmine Rivera, though back in high school I was just Jazz, the quiet girl with thrift store clothes and a scholarship to the prestigious Westlake Academy. The outsider who didn't belong among the children of doctors, lawyers, and business executives. The charity case. At least, that's how they made me feel. The reunion invitation stared back at me from my laptop screen as I sat in my corner office on the 47th floor of Manhattan's gleaming obsidian tower. The irony wasn't lost on me. 10 years ago, I couldn't afford new shoes for prom. Now I ran a tech company valued at over $200 million. 10 years ago, I was invisible. Now Forbes had me on their 30 under 30 list, and nobody from my past had any idea. After graduation, I'd cut all ties with Westlake. No social media presence under my real name. No alumni newsletters. No hometown visits. I'd changed my appearance, trading my long, dark hair for a sophisticated bob, my drugstore makeup for designer brands. I'd even legally changed my name from Jasmine to Jasmine after college, a small but symbolic shift. Not because I was ashamed of my background, but because I wanted to succeed or fail on my own terms, without the weight of expectations or the bitter taste of their condescension. My assistant Kate knocked and entered without waiting for a response. "Your 11 o'clock canceled, but Tokyo is still on for noon," she said, then paused, noting my expression. "Everything okay?" I gestured vaguely at my screen. "High school reunion." "Going to go?" "Absolutely not," I said, closing the email. "Why would I?" Kate shrugged. "Closure? Showing off? Free rubber chicken dinner?" I laughed despite myself. I've had 10 years of therapy. I don't need closure, and I certainly don't need to show off. But after Kate left, I reopened the email. The reunion committee had created a private social media group, exclusive for Westlake class of 2015. Curiosity pulled me in like quicksand. Within minutes, I was scrolling through updates from people who had once made my daily life miserable. There was Brittany Chen, former cheer captain and queen bee, now a pharmaceutical sales rep still living in our hometown. And Lucas Wright, football star who'd had a brief stint in minor league baseball before blowing out his knee. He was selling real estate now, his profile full of forced smiles in front of modest houses. And then, a name that made my stomach clench. Daniel Porter, president of everything, valedictorian, Harvard-bound. The boy everyone adored, including me, secretly, painfully, until the day of the senior prank when I discovered it had all been at my expense. Daniel's profile showed him in a tailored suit, working at his family's investment firm just as everyone had expected. His smile hadn't changed, that perfect, practiced curve of lips that never quite reached his eyes. The memories hit like a physical blow. Standing in the school parking lot, soaked to the skin, surrounded by laughter as Daniel watched from the periphery, not participating but not stopping it either. His silence had hurt more than their actions. I slammed my laptop closed, pulse racing. This was exactly why I'd stayed away. Why dig up old wounds? I had built a new life, a successful one. Let the past stay buried. My phone chimed with a calendar reminder. I had a meeting with investors in 20 minutes. I straightened my Armani blazer, touched up my lipstick, and stepped into the role I'd created for myself. Jasmine Rivera, founder and CEO of Quantum Leap Solutions. the fastest-growing cybersecurity firm on the East Coast. The old jazz was gone, or so I told myself. For the next week, I buried myself in work, ignoring the reunion email that remained stubbornly in my inbox. Neither deleted nor responded to. Kate noticed. She always did. But didn't mention it again until the following Wednesday, when she placed a stack of contracts on my desk for signing. "So," she said casually, "the mysterious high school reunion. Still a hard pass?" I signed, my name with more force than necessary. Completely unnecessary trip down a memory lane I have no interest in revisiting. "Then why haven't you deleted the invitation?" I glared at her, but Kate was immune to my CEO stare, one of the reasons I valued her so highly. "Maybe," she suggested, leaning against my desk, "you want to go but won't admit it." That's ridiculous. Is it? You've worked nonstop for 10 years. You've built something incredible, but you've never once gone back to show them who you became. "Because I don't care what they think," I insisted. Kate raised an eyebrow. "If you didn't care, you would have deleted that email the moment it arrived." I hated that she was right. Something had kept me from hitting delete. Some small, wounded part of me that had never fully healed wanted, what, validation? Revenge? Recognition? That evening, alone in my penthouse apartment with its sweeping views of Central Park, I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out my Westlake yearbook. The glossy cover was still pristine. I'd barely opened it after receiving it. I turned to my senior photo, a thin girl with solemn eyes and a hesitant smile, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The quote beneath read, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Eleanor Roosevelt. Even then, I'd been determined to rise above my circumstances. On impulse, I flipped to the senior superlatives page. Most likely to succeed showed Daniel Porter and Brittany Chen, champagne glasses raised in a toast, their futures seemingly assured by birthright rather than effort. How different things had turned out. According to their profiles, both were doing fine, but nothing extraordinary. Nothing like what I had accomplished starting from nothing, with no connections, no safety net, and no family money. My phone buzzed with a text from my younger sister, Maya. "You see that reunion invite? You going?" Maya, 6 years younger than me, was the only person from my past who knew the full extent of my success. She was in medical school now, her tuition and expenses covered by her big sister, though no one else in our family knew that either. Our mother thought Maya had lucrative scholarships, which was partly true, but they didn't cover everything. It was better this way. No questions about where my money came from. No expectations. I texted back, "Haven't decided? Probably not." Maya's response was immediate. "Bullshit. You should go and show those trust fund babies what real success looks like." I smiled despite myself. Maya had always been my fiercest defender. "It's not about them," I wrote back. "I'm not the same person they knew." "Exactly," Maya replied. "They deserve to see who you became in spite of them." I put the phone down and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. I had worked so hard to leave Westlake behind, to become someone new, someone successful, someone untouchable. Going back felt like regression or surrender. But maybe Kate and Maya were right. Maybe there was something unresolved in me that needed this. Not for validation from others, but for my own sense of completion. To close the circle. Before I could change my mind, I reopened the reunion email and clicked attending. I typed my information into the RSVP form, pausing at current occupation. After a moment's hesitation, I simply wrote, CEO. Let them wonder. As soon as I hit send, anxiety bloomed in my chest. What was I doing? Why reopen old wounds? Why subject myself to people who had never seen my worth? But beneath the anxiety was something else, a flutter of anticipation. For 10 years, I'd been running forward, never looking back. Maybe it was time to face my past, not as the girl I had been, but as the woman I had become. I texted Maya back. Just RSVP'd, yes. What? Have I done? Her response made me laugh out loud. Set the stage for the most satisfying look at me now moment in history. Pack that red Versace dress. The one that costs more than their monthly mortgage payments. I went to bed that night with the yearbook still open on my nightstand, the faces of my past staring up at me. In 2 months, I would see them all again. The people who had overlooked me, underestimated me, forgotten me. The question was, who would I be when I walked through those doors? Through those doors. Through those doors. As the weeks passed, the reunion loomed like a storm on the horizon. Each day brought a new notification from the Westlake alumni group. Amanda got promoted at her law firm. Tyler and Jessica just had their second baby. The updates scrolled endlessly, a parade of ordinary lives that once seemed so extraordinary to me. I handled million-dollar contracts and spoke at international tech conferences without breaking a sweat. Yet the thought of facing my former classmates made my hands tremble. Ridiculous. You need a strategy, Kate announced one afternoon, perching on the edge of my desk. She'd taken my reunion attendance as a personal mission. It's not a hostile takeover, I said, not looking up from my laptop. It's just a party. A party where you're finally revealing your secret identity after a decade. It's basically a superhero movie. She placed a coffee on my desk. So, what's the plan? Grand entrance? Subtle reveal? Drop hints all night, then leave them wondering? I finally looked up. The plan is to show up, say hello, have one drink, then leave before anyone gets drunk enough to reminisce about senior pranks. Kate's expression softened. You still haven't told me what actually happened back then. The memory surfaced like a shark fin cutting through water. The note in my locker. The invitation. The hope. Then standing. In the rain, dressed in my carefully saved-for outfit, realizing no one was coming. That I'd been the joke all along. Nothing worth repeating, I said, the familiar wall slamming down between me and the past. My phone rang, Maya calling. I put her on speaker. I found pictures, she announced without preamble. Mom was cleaning out the garage and found a box of your high school stuff. My stomach dropped. Destroy it immediately. Too late. I'm looking at your yearbook right now. Maya's voice took on a theatrical quality. To Jazz, stay cool and don't ever change. Have a great summer. Oh, such profound sentiment from your classmates. They barely knew I existed, I said. Except for that Daniel guy. His note takes up half a page. There was a rustling of pages. This dude wrote you a whole essay about your quiet strength and how you're going to surprise everyone someday. I closed my eyes. Maya, please put it away. Wait, wasn't he the one who... Yes. The word came out sharper than intended. Even after a decade, Daniel Porter remained a bruise that hadn't healed. Someone I'd foolishly thought had seen me when no one else did until the moment he proved otherwise. Maya fell silent, then said softly, Sorry, Jazz. I didn't mean to pick at old wounds. It's fine. I reached for my coffee, needing something to do with my hands. Ancient history. After we hung up, I tried to focus on quarterly projections, but memories kept intruding. Daniel's yearbook message, his smile in AP English when I'd made a point no one else caught, the way he'd defended me when Brittany made comments about my second-hand clothes. Then the prom incident that revealed it had all been an act, or worse, pity. That night, I did something I'd avoided for years. I searched his name online. Daniel Porter had the expected online presence of a successful finance professional, LinkedIn profile, company bio, a few mentions in industry publications. Nothing exceptional. Nothing to suggest he'd become anything, other than exactly what was expected of him. His father's son, another link in the Porter financial dynasty chain. But then I found a recent interview in a business journal. He'd left his family's firm 2 years ago to start an investment fund focused on minority and women-owned businesses in underserved communities. The interviewer asked what inspired this change. His answer made me sit up straight. I realized I was following a path others had chosen for me. A conversation with an old friend made me question who I really wanted to be. Someone who perpetuated existing systems or someone who helped create new ones. I stared at his photo. Older now, his face leaner, a hint of silver at his temples despite being only 28. His smile seemed different, more genuine. Those weren't the words of the Daniel I remembered. People change. I certainly had. Maya texted me again. Just trying on dresses for your reunion. Think this one says, "My sister runs your world now?" The attached photo showed her posing dramatically in a sequined monstrosity. I laughed despite myself and replied, "I'm going alone, remember? And that dress says, I robbed a Vegas showgirl." First, that dress is fire. Second, you're seriously going alone? Bold move. Was it? Or was it just safer? A buffer against disappointment. Less complicated, I wrote back. No explaining required. Right. And it has nothing to do with you being married to your company and not having dated anyone for longer than a fiscal quarter since college. I didn't respond. Maya wasn't entirely wrong. Relationships required vulnerability, and vulnerability had burned me before. Far easier to focus on building something that couldn't reject me, my company. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 6 weeks later, I found myself in a luxury suite at the Four Seasons back in my hometown, hanging up the dress I'd finally selected. Not the red Versace Maya had suggested, but a simple black Chanel that whispered money, rather than screamed it. Classic, understated. Armor. My phone rang. Kate checking in. Everything set? Car arranged? Escape plan in place? Yes to all three, I confirmed, surveying the room. Though I'm questioning my decision to stay the upper whole weekend, the full immersion experience. Plus, didn't you say there's a brunch on Sunday? Which I'm definitely not attending. The class reunion was one thing. An intimate brunch with hangovers and deeper conversations was quite another. Just remember, Kate said, her voice taking on the tone she used when delivering important client information. Whatever happens, you've already won. You're Jasmine Rivera. You employ more people than the population of your hometown. That's a slight exaggeration. Only slight. You've built something amazing from nothing. No one can take that away from you. Not even the ghosts of high school. Past. After we hung up, I stood at the hotel window, looking out at the familiar skyline of my hometown. 10 years gone, yet nothing seemed to have changed. The same mountains in the distance, the same church spires, the same shopping mall where I'd worked after school to help my mom with rent. But I had changed. Profoundly. The scared girl who left. This town with nothing but determination and a scholarship wouldn't recognize the woman I'd become. Or maybe she would. Maybe she'd created me, fashioned this successful, untouchable version of herself as protection against ever feeling that small again. A text from an unknown number jolted me from my thoughts. Jazz, it's Daniel Porter. Heard you're coming. To the reunion. Looking forward to seeing you. My heart hammered against my ribs. How did he get my number? Who told him I was coming? And why, after 10 years, was my pulse racing like I was still 17? I didn't respond. 3 hours later, dressed in my understated Chanel, hair and makeup flawless, I stood outside the banquet hall of the Westlake Country Club where our reunion was being held. Music and laughter spilled out each time the doors opened. A banner proclaimed, "Welcome back Westlake Class of 15. My Uber driver had done a double take when I gave him the destination. You went to Westlake? fancy. The familiar assumption that someone who looked like me, with my complexion and my mother's features, couldn't possibly belong among the wealthy families of Westlake. I almost turned around right then, almost called for another Uber back to my hotel. What was I trying to prove, anyway? That I'd succeeded? I already knew that. That I'd overcome their judgment? I didn't need their validation. But then I remembered something my first business mentor had told me. The things that scare you most are usually the things most worth doing. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and pulled open the door. The transformation of the country club's ballroom was impressive. Twinkling lights, elegant centerpieces, a dance floor, and a photo area with Westlake Forever backdrop. A memory wall displayed blown-up photos from our school days. A bar in each corner served signature cocktails named after school events. Someone had put serious effort into this. I paused at the check-in table where a blonde woman I vaguely recognized was distributing name tags. Her eyes flicked up, then back down without recognition. "Name?" she asked. "Jasmine Rivera." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing in confusion. "Jazz Rivera?" "Jasmine now, but yes." "Oh my God, I didn't recognize you at all. You look—" She gestured, vaguely at all of me, struggling to reconcile the quiet scholarship girl with the polished woman before her. "Different." I smiled. 10 years will do that." She handed me a name tag with Jazz Rivera printed on it. I affixed it to my dress, deciding not to correct her. One small connection to who I'd been. I stepped into the ballroom and paused, taking in the scene. Familiar faces everywhere, slightly older versions of the teenagers who had populated my high school days. Some instantly recognizable, others transformed by time. They clustered in groups that eerily mirrored the high school social hierarchy. Former athletes together, former debate team together, former popular girls comparing rings and babies. For a moment, I was 17 again, clutching my lunch tray, scanning the cafeteria for a safe place to sit. The feeling was so visceral I nearly retreated. Then someone touched my elbow. "Jazz? Is that really you?" I turned and found myself face to face with Daniel Porter. And just like that, the past and present collided. Time seemed to stop as I stared into the face that had haunted the edges of my memories for a decade. Daniel Porter. He'd aged well. His boyish good looks matured into a handsome man with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes, and a confidence that seemed less rehearsed than I remembered. "It is you," he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I found my voice. "Almost didn't." "I'm glad you did." His eyes held mine with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You look incredible, Jazz. Sorry, it's Jasmine now, right?" "How did you know that?" I asked, then remembered his text. "And how did you get my number?" "Maya," he said simply. "My sister. The traitor." "You're in touch with my sister?" He shifted, suddenly looking less sure of himself. "We ran into each other about a month ago when I was back visiting my parents. She works at the hospital where my mom had some tests done." I made a mental note to call Maya immediately after this. What else had she told him? "She mentioned you might be coming tonight," he continued. "Said you were doing well in New York." The understatement of the decade. I nodded noncommittally. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken history. I searched his face for any sign of the boy who had let me stand alone in the rain, humiliated and heartbroken, but found only a man who seemed genuinely pleased to see me. "Can I get you a drink?" he offered. I almost declined, but decided a glass of liquid. Courage might help. "White wine, thank you." As he moved toward the bar, I took a moment to collect myself. This was exactly what I'd feared, that seeing him would unravel the careful composure I'd built. I reminded myself that I wasn't 17 anymore. I wasn't vulnerable. I was Jasmine Rivera, CEO of Quantum Leap Solutions. From across the room, I caught Brittany Chen watching our interaction, her expression calculating. She looked essentially the same, still beautiful, still immaculately put together, though her smile seemed more strained than I remembered. When she realized I'd caught her staring, she offered a little wave and began making her way toward me. Perfect. Just the conversation I was looking forward to. "Jazz Rivera," she exclaimed with the exaggerated enthusiasm of someone who'd had a few drinks. "I almost didn't recognize you." "Jasmine now," I corrected gently. "How are you, Brittany?" "Oh, you know, living the dream." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Still in pharmaceutical sales, married to Brett Jackson. You remember him from the lacrosse team? 2 kids, girl and boy, perfect little house in the Oakwood subdivision." She rattled this off like a rehearsed speech, her eyes constantly scanning the room as if looking for someone more important to talk to. "The old Brittany, exactly as I remembered." "And you?" she asked, giving me a quick once-over. "Maya mentioned you're in New York? Doing what? Fashion? You always had that creative vibe." Before I could answer, Daniel returned with 2 glasses of wine. "Brittany," he acknowledged with a polite nod. "Daniel." Her voice rose an octave. "I've been looking for you. The reunion committee wants a photo of most likely to succeed by the old yearbook display." He handed me my wine. "Maybe later. I was just catching up with Jasmine." Brittany's smile tightened. "Of course. Well, don't disappear. The committee has that whole presentation planned for later." She touched my arm in a gesture of false intimacy. "So good to see you, Jazz. We should totally catch up more." As she walked away, I couldn't help but notice her whispering to another former cheerleader, both of them glancing back at me. "Some things never change," I murmured into my wine glass. Daniel chuckled softly. "And some things do." He gestured around the room. "Half these people are playing the same roles they did in high school, just with mortgages and kids now. And the other half have either completely reinvented themselves or are pretending to." He studied me. "I'm trying to figure out which one you are." His directness caught me off guard. The Daniel I remembered had been more diplomatic, more careful with his words. "Maybe I'm both," I said. "Maybe we all are." "Fair enough." He raised his glass slightly. "To reinvention, then." I clinked my glass against his, unsure where this conversation was heading. Part of me wanted to confront him about prom night, to finally ask why he'd let it happen. Another part wanted to maintain the careful distance I'd cultivated from my past. "So," he said after a moment, "are you going to make me ask, or are you going to tell me what you've been doing for the past 10 years? Maya was suspiciously vague. At least my sister had kept some secrets. I considered deflecting, giving him the sanitized version I'd prepared for casual inquiries. But something in me wanted him to know, wanted to see his reaction. "I'm the founder and CEO of Quantum Leap Solutions." His eyes widened slightly. "The cybersecurity firm? The one that just secured that Pentagon contract?" I nodded, surprised he knew of it. "Among others." Jasmine, that's incredible." His genuine amazement was oddly satisfying. "I read about your company in Forbes. They called you one of the most innovative leaders in the industry." "You read Forbes?" I asked, deflecting from the compliment. "When there's a good reason to." His eyes hadn't left my face. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Your company is valued at what, 200 million? That's something most people would put on a billboard." I took another sip of wine. "I prefer to let my work speak for itself." "Always did," he said softly, and I felt a flicker of that old connection I'd once imagined between us, the sense that he actually saw me when others didn't. But history couldn't be erased so easily. I steeled myself. "And what about you? I read you left your family's firm to start your own fund." "News travels." He nodded. "About 2 years ago. My father still hasn't forgiven me." "Why the change?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, considering. His answer. I spent years doing exactly what was expected of me. Harvard, then straight to Porter Financial. I was good at it, but it never felt mine. He looked down at his drink. I kept thinking about people like you. People like me? I echoed. People with talent and drive who just needed someone to believe in them, to invest in them. Not out of charity, but because they were a good bet. He met my eyes again. My fund specifically seeks out entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds, people who might not get through the door at traditional venture capital firms. The irony wasn't lost on me. So you're what? Trying to make up for past sins by funding diversity initiatives? A flash of hurt crossed his face. That's not how I'd put it. How would you put it? Before he could answer, we were interrupted by Lucas Wright, the former football star, now significantly heavier but still sporting his varsity jacket. Porter, my man, they need you for that most likely to succeed photo. He noticed me and did a double take. Whoa, Jazz Rivera? No way! Daniel looked annoyed at the interruption. Lucas, good to see you. Do you mind giving us a minute? Can't? Man, Brittany's on the warpath about this presentation thing. Says everyone's waiting. Lucas grabbed Daniel's arm, physically pulling him toward the stage. Daniel threw me an apologetic look. We'll finish this conversation, he promised. Don't disappear, okay? As they walked away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger that Daniel thought he could just smooth over the past with a few compliments and a story about his philanthropic awakening. Confusion about why I even cared after all this time. And beneath it all, a troubling undercurrent of that same old attraction that had made his betrayal so painful a decade ago. I needed air. The country club's terrace offered a momentary escape from the noise and memories inside. I leaned against the railing, looking out at the manicured golf course, illuminated by subtle landscape lighting. The cool night air helped clear my head. Hiding out here won't save you from the slideshow, came a voice from behind me. They've got baby photos. I turned to find Amanda Choi, my former lab partner in AP Chemistry. We hadn't been friends exactly, but she'd been one of the few people who'd treated me like a person rather than a curiosity or a charity case. Please tell me you're joking about baby photos, I said. She laughed, joining me at the railing. Sadly, no, Brittany went all out. There's a whole journey through the year's presentation scheduled. Wonderful. So, she said, studying me with undisguised curiosity, Maya says you're some big-shot CEO now. That true? Or is she spinning tales? I'd forgotten how direct Amanda could be. It's true. And you kept it secret because… I shrugged. It wasn't relevant. Bullshit, she said cheerfully. You disappeared without a trace after graduation, scrubbed yourself from social media, and now you show up looking like you stepped off a magazine cover. You wanted the reveal. The question is why. Maybe I just wanted to be judged on my own merits, not my background or my bank account. Amanda raised an eyebrow. Or maybe you wanted to prove something to the people who underestimated you, which, for the record, is completely valid. God knows most of them deserve it. Before I could respond, the sound of microphone feedback pierced the air, followed by Brittany's voice calling everyone inside for the presentation. Amanda grimaced. That's our cue. Coming? In a minute, I said, needing just a few more moments of peace. After she left, I took out my phone and texted Maya. You gave Daniel my number? We're going to have words. Her reply was immediate. You'll thank me later. How's it going? Surreal, I responded honestly. Everyone's playing their old roles but with crow's feet. And Daniel? I hesitated, then wrote, different than I expected. Started his own investment fund for underrepresented entrepreneurs. Very convenient redemption arc. Or maybe people change. Is he still hot? I pocketed my phone without answering. Of course he was still attractive. That wasn't the point. From inside came the sound of applause and music, the presentation starting. I should go back in, face whatever mortifying high school photos Brittany had dug up, exchange a few more polite conversations, then make my graceful exit. Mission accomplished. Secret revealed. But as I turned to go inside, I found Daniel standing in the doorway, backlit by the lights from the ballroom. "There you are," he said. "You're missing the show." "Intentionally," I replied. He smiled. "Can't blame you." He joined me at the railing instead of insisting we go back inside. "But you should know they just showed your senior photo side by side with your Forbes cover. The room is buzzing." My stomach dropped. "What?" Brittany found it online. From scholarship student to software mogul, Jasmine Rivera's rise to tech industry power player. It's quite an impressive transformation. So my secret was fully out. I felt oddly exposed, yet also relieved. I'm sure everyone's shocked. Some are. Others are falling all over themselves, claiming they always knew you'd make it big. His voice held an edge of disgust. People are already rewriting history. "And what about you?" I couldn't help asking. "Are you rewriting our history too?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with a decade of unspoken pain. Daniel's expression grew serious. Jasmine, about prom night. I know you probably won't believe me, but I had no idea what Brittany and the others were planning. When I found out, I tried to find you, but you were already gone." I stared at him, searching for the lie, the manipulation in his words. "You expect me to believe that after 10 years? "No," he said simply. "I don't, but it's the truth anyway." "I waited for 2 hours in the rain," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. 2 hours, Daniel, in a dress that took me 3 months of weekend shifts to afford, while everyone else was at the real location, laughing about how gullible I was. "Not everyone." His voice was quiet. "I left as soon as I realized what had happened. I went to the park, but you weren't there anymore. I went to your house, but your mom said you didn't want to see anyone. I remembered that night all too clearly. Coming home soaked and humiliated, my mother's concern, her anger on my behalf. I'd locked myself in my room, refusing to speak to anyone. Convenient," I said, "that you tried to find me when no one could verify it." "I sent you flowers the next day," he pressed, a note apologizing. "Did you get them?" I had. Yellow roses with a handwritten card. I'd thrown them in the trash without reading the note. "It doesn't matter now," I said, straightening my shoulders. "It was high school. Ancient history. Then, why did you really come tonight?" he asked. "Why show up after 10 years of silence if not to confront the past?" It was the question I'd been avoiding even with myself. Why had I come? To show off? To seek closure? To prove something? "Maybe I just wanted to see if anything had changed," I said finally, or if everyone was still playing the same games. Daniel moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "And your verdict?" Inside, the music had grown louder. The presentation must have ended, the dancing begun. Through the windows, I could see our former classmates laughing, drinking, reliving their glory days, or trying to impress each other with their adult accomplishments. The same social dynamics, just with higher stakes. "The game changed," I said. "But most of the players haven't." "And me?" Daniel asked. "Am I still the same player to you?" The question felt too intimate, too close to things I'd buried long ago. Before I could answer, the terrace doors burst open and Brittany stumbled out, clearly tipsy. "There you are," she announced. "Everyone's looking for you two. We need our most likely to succeed for the current day photo." She grabbed Daniel's arm. "Come on, power couple. The photographer's waiting." I froze. "We're not a couple." Brittany looked between us, confused. "But Maya said, never mind. Just Come inside for the photo. Everyone wants to hear about your amazing company, Jazz. Who would have thought our little scholarship girl would end up the most successful person in the class? Her words, though superficially complimentary, carried the same condescending tone I remembered from high school, as if my success were some amusing anomaly rather than the result of hard work and determination. Daniel gently extracted himself from her grip. "We'll be in shortly, Brittany." She pouted but retreated inside, leaving us in tense silence. "I should probably go," I said, suddenly exhausted by all of it. The performative reunion, the confrontation with the past, Daniel's unexpected revelations. "Please don't." His voice was quiet but intense. "Not yet. There's so much I want to tell you, to explain." I looked at him. This person who had once meant so much to me, who had broken my heart without even realizing it, who claimed to have changed. "Why does it matter so much to you?" I asked. "Why? After all this time?" Daniel held my gaze, the intensity in his eyes making my breath catch. "Because for 10 years, I've wondered what happened to the quiet girl, who was smarter than everyone else in the room but never felt the need to prove it. Because every time I've made a major decision in my life, I've found myself thinking, what would Jazz do? Because the terrace doors opened again, this time revealing Lucas with a bottle of champagne. "Yo, Porter, we're doing shots for old." "Time's sake! You in or what?" Daniel's jaw tightened in frustration. "Not now, Lucas. Come on, man. For Westlake." He was already pouring champagne into plastic shot glasses, oblivious to the tension he'd interrupted. I seized the moment of distraction. "I need to make a call. Excuse me." Before either of them could respond, I slipped past Lucas and back into the ballroom, weaving through the crowd toward the exit. I needed space, air, time to process everything Daniel had said. But as I reached the door, a hand caught my wrist. I turned, expecting Daniel, but found myself face to face with Brittany instead. Her perfect smile had an edge to it now. "Leaving. So soon?" she asked. "But we haven't even had a chance to properly catch up." Something in her tone made me wary. "Another time, perhaps." Her grip on my wrist tightened slightly. "You know, it's funny. All these years I thought you were avoiding us because you were embarrassed about where you ended up. Poor Jazz Rivera, too ashamed to face her successful classmates." Her smile sharpened. "But it was the opposite, wasn't it? You stayed away because you knew your success would make us all look small." I extricated my wrist from her grasp. "I stayed away because high school wasn't a highlight of my life. Simple as that? Is it?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Or did you come back now because you finally have something to lord over everyone? Especially Daniel?" "This isn't a competition, Brittany." "Everything's a competition," she hissed, her perfect facade cracking. "And you're making sure everyone knows you won. The scholarship girl beat us all." Her words confirmed my worst fears about coming tonight. That no matter what I'd accomplished, no matter how I'd changed, to them I would always be defined by my background. "Good night, Brittany," I said firmly, turning away. He never wanted. You know," she called after me, her voice carrying just enough to make nearby heads turn. "Daniel." It was always a game to him. I stopped, her words landing like a physical blow. Slowly, I turned back to face her. "What did you say?" Brittany's eyes gleamed with malicious triumph. "You think he didn't know about prom night? That it was all my idea? Please. Nothing happened at Westlake without Daniel Porter's approval. He was the one who suggested we teach you a lesson about knowing your place." The room seemed to tilt around me. It couldn't be true. Yet a part of me had always wondered why he'd never warned me, never stepped in to stop it. "You're lying," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Ask him yourself," she challenged. "Ask him where he really was while you were standing alone in the rain." Before I could respond, Daniel appeared beside us, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "Everything okay here?" "Perfect timing," Brittany said sweetly. "Jazz and I were just discussing prom night. She seems to think you were innocent in the whole affair." Daniel's face paled. His eyes darted to mine, filled with something that looked suspiciously like guilt. And in that moment, the carefully constructed armor I'd built over the past decade cracked wide open. Cracked wide open. Cracked wide. Daniel's face went ashen. "Brittany, this isn't the place." "When is the place?" I asked, my voice unnervingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Another 10 years from now?" Others had begun to notice our confrontation, the circle of space around us widening as classmates pretended not to eavesdrop while clearly straining to hear every word. "Jazz, please," Daniel said, his voice dropping. "Let me explain." "I've waited a decade for an explanation," I cut in. "So has it been worth it? Watching my career from afar, tracking my success like some kind of— what? Experiment? Penance?" Brittany's smile curled with satisfaction. "I'll leave you two to catch up." She sauntered away, mission accomplished. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "Not here," he said firmly. "Please." Something in his eyes, desperation perhaps, or genuine remorse, made me pause. I'd come too far to leave without answers. "Fine. Outside." We walked in tense silence through the ballroom and past curious stares. News of my success had clearly spread, transforming me from forgettable wallflower to object of fascination. I caught fragments of whispered conversations. Her company, millions. Who would have thought? The cool night air hit me like a relief as we emerged onto the now empty terrace. I crossed my arms, not against the chill, but as a barrier between us. "Talk." Daniel paced, gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. "I didn't orchestrate what happened at prom. But I knew about it, and I didn't stop it. That's the truth." The admission landed like a blow. "Why?" "Because I was a coward," he said simply. "Brittany and her friends planned it. They showed me the fake invitation they sent you, laughing about how you'd be waiting all dressed up while the real prom was happening across town. And you said nothing." The betrayal felt fresh again, reopening a wound I'd thought long healed. "I told them it was cruel, but I didn't." He paused, swallowing hard. "I didn't tell you. I convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility. That warning you would somehow violate some stupid social code." His laugh was hollow. "God, I was pathetic." "But you sent flowers afterward, when the damage was already done. When I realized what I'd allowed to happen." He met my gaze directly. "I went to the park looking for you when I couldn't stomach being at prom anymore. You were already gone. I tried your house, but your mom said you wouldn't see anyone." I remembered that night with painful clarity, coming home soaked and humiliated, my mother's fierce protectiveness as she turned away visitors. "So you sent flowers and considered your conscience clear?" "No." His voice hardened. "I confronted Brittany and the others. It didn't go well. They made the last month of senior year hell for me. Nothing compared to what you experienced, but enough that I understood a fraction of what it felt like to be ostracized." This was news to me. I'd withdrawn so completely after prom that I'd barely registered the social dynamics around me, pushing through to graduation on autopilot. "That's why you wrote that note in my yearbook," I realized. "About my quiet strength and how I'd surprise everyone someday." "Guilt." "Admiration," he corrected. "You didn't let them break you. You endured what I couldn't even face. And you were right, about me playing a role others created for me, about living up to expectations instead of challenging them." He took a step closer. "You saw through me even then. I wanted to hold on to my anger, to the clean, sharp certainty of having been wronged, But the narrative I'd constructed was fragmenting, becoming more complex than the simple story of betrayal I'd told myself for years. "Why didn't you ever reach out after graduation?" I asked. "If you felt so guilty?" "I tried once. I found your email through the alumni newsletter and sent you a message. When you didn't respond, I figured you wanted nothing to do with me. Can't say I blamed you. I had no memory of this email, but then I'd deleted most communications from Westlake without reading them in those early years. And then you disappeared," he continued. "No social media, no alumni events, until Maya mentioned you might come. To the reunion, I thought I'd never see you again." A thought occurred to me. "Is that why you started your investment fund? Some twisted form of making amends?" Daniel stiffened. "My fund isn't about you, Jasmine. It's about recognizing that talent and potential exist everywhere, not just in the privileged circles I grew up in." His eyes flashed with sudden intensity. "Though I won't deny that knowing you influenced me. You showed me what was possible when someone with extraordinary ability overcomes extraordinary obstacles." The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the practice charm of the boy I'd known. This was something rawer, more genuine. "You've been following my career." It wasn't a question. Yes. No hesitation, no apology. At first out, of curiosity, then admiration. "What you've built is remarkable." "And what exactly did you hope would happen when we finally crossed paths again? That I'd just forgive and forget?" "I didn't know," he admitted. "I just knew I needed to tell you the truth, even if you hated me for it. I've carried this for 10 years, Jasmine. My name on his lips still affected me, and I hated myself for it. So now you've told me. Consider yourself absolved." I turned to leave. "That's not why I—" Daniel's hand caught my arm, then immediately released when I tensed. "I'm not asking for absolution. I'm asking for a chance to know the woman you've become." Through the glass doors, I could see our classmates laughing, dancing, living in their comfortable bubbles of nostalgia. In that moment, I felt utterly disconnected from them, from the girl I'd been, from the pain that had shaped me, even from the carefully constructed success that had been my shield. "Why?" "Because you're the most interesting person in that room," he said simply. "Because I've spent a decade wondering what if. Because every significant choice I've made has been influenced by the regret of not being brave enough when it mattered." Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened. Amanda appeared, her expression apologetic. "Sorry to interrupt, but they're doing the class photo in 5, and they're insisting everyone participate. Also, your sister's been blowing up my phone, asking if you're okay. Maya." In the drama of confronting Daniel, I'd forgotten about her betrayal. "Tell her I'm fine," I said, pulling myself together. "And that she's in trouble." Amanda glanced between Daniel and me, clearly sensing the tension. "Should I tell them you're skipping the photo?" I considered it. Walking away would be easiest. Retreat? To my hotel? Process this conversation in private? Maintain my emotional distance? But running had been my strategy for 10 years. Maybe it was time for something different. "No," I decided. "I'll be there." After Amanda left, Daniel studied me. "You're staying?" "For the photo," I clarified. "Then I'm going back to my hotel. This is a lot to process." He nodded, accepting this boundary. "Can I call you tomorrow? Maybe we could talk without an audience of nosy former classmates." The rational part of me knew I should refuse. The wounds were too old, the history too complicated. Yet something in me, something I'd spent years trying to suppress, wanted to understand who he'd become, just as he seemed genuinely interested in who I was now. "One coffee," I conceded. "That's all I'm promising." His smile was cautious, but genuine. "I'll take it." We headed back inside for the photo, maintaining a careful distance between us. As we joined the assembled class on the stairs, I felt dozens of curious gazes. No longer invisible, no longer overlooked, but seen, finally, for who I truly was. Not just the scholarship girl or the unexpected success story, but Jasmine Rivera, a woman who had defied their expectations and created a life entirely on her own terms. The photographer arranged us in rows, directing the tallest to the back. I ended up sandwiched between Amanda and a former debate team member whose name I couldn't recall. Daniel stood several people away, but I could feel his awareness of me like a physical presence. "Smile, everyone," the photographer called. "Westlake's finest, 10 years later." As the camera flashed, capturing this moment of forced camaraderie, I found myself wondering who among us had truly changed and who was still playing the same roles assigned to them in adolescence. The lines weren't as clear as I'd once believed. After the photo, I made my excuses and slipped away, before anyone could corner me for more questions about my company or my life in New York. Outside, I ordered a rideshare and waited in the quiet darkness, reflecting on the evening's revelations. Daniel had been flawed, cowardly even, but not the mastermind of my humiliation as I'd imagined. Brittany had played her expected role, the queen bee whose sting had merely evolved into something more subtle over time. And I had shown up not just to prove my success, but to reclaim a piece of myself I'd left behind a decade ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Did you survive?" "Did he survive?" "Details," I texted back. "Complicated. Coffee tomorrow. We'll call you after." Her response was immediate. "OMG, yes. And you're welcome, by the way. Best wingwoman ever." I couldn't help but smile. For all her meddling, Maya had always seen more clearly than I had in some ways. Perhaps there was value in confronting the past rather than running from it. Perhaps there was more to Daniel Porter than the role he'd played in our shared history. My car arrived, and as I settled into the back seat, I glanced one last time at the country club where my former classmates continued their night of nostalgia. 10 years ago, I'd left this town believing I needed to erase every connection to move forward. Now I wondered if true progress meant integrating who I'd been with who I'd become, acknowledging the scared, determined girl who had shaped the successful woman. "Everything okay, ma'am?" the driver asked, noting my pensive expression in the rearview mirror. "Yes," I said, surprisingly certain. "I think it might be." Morning light streamed through the hotel suite's windows, illuminating the remains of my room service breakfast. I'd been up since dawn, my mind racing with unfinished conversations and unexpected revelations from the previous night. My laptop was open to a video call with Kate, who had demanded an immediate debrief. "So let me get this straight," she said, coffee mug in hand, her New York apartment visible in the background. "The boy you've been low-key obsessed with for a decade, I was not obsessed," I protested. "Not obsessed," I protested. "The boy whose betrayal literally shaped your entire career trajectory," she amended with an eye roll, "claims he wasn't actually the mastermind of your humiliation, just a cowardly bystander who failed to warn you. And now you're having coffee with him?" When she put it that way, it did sound absurd. "One coffee. For closure." Uh-huh. Kate's skepticism was palpable even through the screen. "And the fact that he's been following your career, started a fund specifically designed to help people like you, and according to your sister is, quote, still hot as hell, has nothing to do with your decision." I glared at her. "Whose side are you on?" "Team Jasmine. Always." Her expression softened. "Look, I just don't want you to get hurt again. You've built this amazing life, this company that's changing the industry. You don't need validation from these people." "I know that," I said more sharply than intended. "This isn't about validation. It's about resolving something that's been unfinished." Kate studied me through the screen. "You remember what Dr. Patterson said in your leadership seminar? Sometimes we revisit the past, not to change it, but to make peace with how it changed us." The quote hit home. My therapist had said something similar years ago when I was working through my complicated feelings about my upbringing and high school years. Perhaps this wasn't about Daniel at all, but about reconciling the different versions of myself. The vulnerable girl who had been hurt and the powerful woman who had risen above it. Just be careful, Kate added, and call me afterward with every single detail. After ending the call, I spent an hour answering emails. Crisis at a client site, board member questions about our new security protocol, an acquisition opportunity Kate had flagged for review. The familiar rhythm of work centered me, reminding me of the life I'd built so carefully. At precisely 11 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Still on for coffee? There's a place called Riverview near your hotel. Quiet, good espresso. I hesitated, then replied simply, see you there at 11:30. Riverview Cafe was tucked along the riverfront promenade that had been revitalized since my high school days. Once an industrial wasteland, it was now lined with boutiques and cafes, catering to a more upscale clientele than this town had previously supported. Another sign of how things had changed, or perhaps just been repackaged. Daniel was already waiting at an outdoor table, dressed more casually than the night before in jeans and a simple button-down. He stood when he saw me approach, his expression a careful mix of hopefulness and restraint. You came, he said, as if he hadn't quite believed I would. I said I would. I took the seat across from him, placing my designer sunglasses on the table, another layer of armor. A server appeared and we ordered. A cappuccino for me, black coffee for him. The familiar ritual of coffee shop pleasantries gave us both a moment to adjust to this strange new dynamic. No audience of former classmates, no immediate pressure of the past, just two adults who had once known different versions of each other. When the server left, Daniel spoke first. How did the rest of your evening go? Fine. I left after the photo. Smart move. It devolved into karaoke around midnight. Lucas's rendition of Don't Stop Believin' will haunt my nightmares. I smiled despite myself. Some things never change. Some things do. His eyes met mine with that same intensity from the night before. Thank you for meeting me today. I know you didn't have to. Our coffees arrived, giving me a moment to gather my thoughts. The morning sun caught the silver at his temples, a reminder that we weren't teenagers anymore, but adults with a decade of experiences between us. Last night you said you've been following my career, I began, wrapping my hands around the warm up. Why? Daniel considered the question. At first it was guilt. I saw your name in a tech publication a few years after graduation. Something about a security startup founded by promising young entrepreneur Jasmine Rivera. I was curious, so I looked you up. And then I was impressed. His honesty was disarming. You were building something innovative, something meaningful. Each time I saw your name again, new funding round, industry award, the Forbes profile, it was clear you weren't just successful, you were exceptional. I'd heard similar praise from investors and industry peers, but somehow coming from Daniel, who had known me before, who had seen me at my most vulnerable, it carried different weight. You could have reached out, I pointed out. Instead of watching from a distance, would you have responded? He challenged gently. I had to concede the point. Probably not. Exactly. He took a sip of his coffee. Besides, after a while, it wasn't about our past anymore. I genuinely admired what you were building. Your focus on protecting small businesses from cyber threats, your scholarship program for first-generation tech students. You were using your success to create opportunity for others. The fact that he knew these details, aspects of my work that weren't highlighted in glossy magazine profiles, caught me off guard. He'd been paying attention, not just to the headlines, but to the substance. Is that what inspired your investment? Fund? I asked, returning to the question from the previous night. Watching my company? Partly, he admitted. But it was also watching my father's firm systematically overlook talented entrepreneurs who didn't fit a certain profile. People who hadn't gone to the right schools, who didn't have the right connections. People like me, I finished. Like you, he agreed. Though if you'd pitched Porter Financial, even my father would have invested. Your company's growth metrics alone would have demanded it. I smiled slightly. I never needed to pitch traditional VCs. We were profitable from year 2. I know. Another thing that makes you remarkable. There was that word again. Remarkable. Not successful or impressive, but remarkable, as if I were something to be marveled at. Daniel, I said carefully, what exactly are you hoping will come from this conversation? From reconnecting? He sat back, considering the question with unexpected seriousness. Honestly, I don't know. When Maya told me you might be at the reunion, all I knew was that I needed to talk to you. To explain. To see who you'd become. He paused. Maybe to see if there was any chance of something else. A fresh start, perhaps. The directness of his answer surprised me. The Daniel I remembered had been more diplomatic, more careful with his words and intentions. A fresh start, I repeated skeptically. After everything. Not forgetting the past, he clarified. But not being defined by it either. Seeing each other as we are now, not just who we were then. Our eyes met across the table, and for a moment, I allowed myself to consider it, getting to know this adult version of Daniel without the weight of high school dynamics. The thought was both terrifying and oddly compelling. I live in New York, I said, a practical objection. My company is there. My life is there. I'm aware. He smiled slightly. I'm not suggesting we jump into anything. Just possibility. Permission to call you. To visit when I'm in New York for business, which is often. To see if there's something worth exploring. The rational CEO part of me was listing all the reasons this was a terrible idea. The complicated history, the geographical distance, my demanding schedule, the potential for reopening old wounds. But another part of me, a part I'd often silenced in the name of self-protection, was curious. Why now? I asked. After 10 years of silence? Daniel looked down at his coffee, then back at me with unexpected vulnerability. Because watching you from a distance made me realize something I was too young and stupid to see clearly in high school. You're extraordinary, Jasmine. Not just your success, but who you are, how you think, what you stand for. He leaned forward slightly. And because I've spent a decade wondering what if, about the only person who ever really saw me beneath all the expectations and performance. His words resonated uncomfortably with my own experience. The constant sense of performing, of hiding parts of myself to fit others' expectations. It was a lonely way to live, even surrounded by success. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a calendar alert. The reminder for my afternoon flight back to New York in 2 hours. Reality intruding. Reality intruding. I have to go soon, I said, silencing the phone. My flight. Daniel nodded, disappointment visible, but contained. Of course. We fell silent. The weight of unfinished conversation between us. So many questions still unanswered. So many possibilities. Unexplored. Ask me something, he said suddenly. Anything you've wondered all these years. Before you go. The unexpectedness of the offer made me pause. There were dozens of questions I could ask. About prom night, about his life since Westlake, about what had really happened in those final weeks of senior year, but one question rose above the rest. Were you ever really my friend? I asked, the vulnerability in my voice surprising even me. Or was it all just, I don't know, guilt or charity or your own form of rebellion against expectations? Daniel didn't answer immediately, giving the question the consideration it deserved. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but certain. "You were the only real friendship I had in high school," he said. "Everyone else wanted something from me. Status, connections, validation. You just wanted to discuss Russian literature and argue about physics theories." His smile held genuine warmth. "You never pretended to be impressed by my family name or my college acceptances. You called me out when I was being phony or privileged or lazy in my thinking. No one else did that." The sincerity in his voice touched something in me I'd thought long buried. The memory of those brief moments when I'd felt truly seen, truly valued for my mind rather than judged for my background. But then why? I couldn't finish the question. Why didn't I stand up for you when it mattered? He completed it for me. Because I was a coward, because I'd spent my whole life being what everyone expected, and the thought of risking that was terrifying. He met my gaze directly. "It's my biggest regret, Jasmine, not just because of what happened to you, but because I betrayed myself in the process." Something shifted between us in that moment. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Recognition of how young we'd been, how shaped by circumstances beyond our control, how capable of both cruelty and growth. I glanced at my watch, reality intruding again. "I really do have to go." "I know." He hesitated, then pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back. "My personal number, if you ever want to continue this conversation or start a new one." I took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. "I'm not promising anything." "I'm not asking for promises," he said. "Just possibility." As I stood to leave, he remained seated, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Hope, perhaps, or resignation, or some complex blend of emotions that matched my own confused feelings. "Goodbye, Daniel." "Goodbye, Jasmine." Then, as I turned to go, he added softly, "For now." I walked away, the business card a small weight in my pocket, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The past 24 hours had upended narratives I'd held for a decade, forcing me to reconsider not just what had happened, but how it had shaped me, for better and worse. As I reached the street, my phone rang. Maya's name flashed on the screen. "Well?" she demanded without preamble. "How was coffee with Destiny?" I looked back toward the cafe, where Daniel still sat, watching me walk away. "Complicated," I answered honestly. "Very complicated. Very complicated." The New York skyline welcomed me home with its familiar jagged silhouette against the evening sky. From the back seat of my rideshare, I watched the city lights blur together, a stark contrast to the quiet streets of my hometown. The reunion felt like a dream already, something that had happened to someone else. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since I'd boarded my flight. Kate with questions about Monday's executive meeting. My assistant with schedule updates. The head of engineering with a security protocol concern. And nestled among the professional demands, 3 messages that pulled me back to the weekend I was trying to process. Maya. "So, are you going to call him or what?" Brittany Chen. "Jazz, it was so good catching up. We should grab lunch next time you're in town. Would love to hear more about your company. XOXO, and simply, thank you for listening. Safe travels. Daniel." I hadn't responded to any of them. The car pulled up to my building, the doorman rushing forward to help with my small overnight bag. The familiar routine of returning home, greeting Eduardo at the front desk, checking my mail, riding the elevator to my penthouse, grounded me in the present. My apartment welcomed me with its pristine surfaces and carefully curated minimalism. Everything in its place, everything controlled. The complete opposite of the emotional chaos I'd experienced in the past 24 hours. I dropped my bag and kicked off my shoes, heading straight for the balcony. 45 floors above the city, I could breathe again. The distant sounds of traffic and the cool evening air cleared my head as I leaned against the railing, trying to reconcile the person I'd been this weekend with the life I'd built here. The Westlake yearbook I'd packed on impulse sat in my bag, a physical reminder of the past I'd confronted. With a sigh, I returned inside and pulled it out, flipping to the inscription I'd avoided reading for years. Daniel's handwriting filled half, a page in the back corner. Jazz, people will tell you high school is the best time of your life. They're wrong. For people like you, people with minds that never stop questioning, hearts that feel too much, and spirits stronger than anyone realizes, life only gets better from here. You see the world differently than the rest of us. Don't ever lose that. You're going to surprise everyone someday, though not me. I've always known you were extraordinary. Someday we'll meet again when all these high school hierarchies and expectations don't matter anymore. I hope you'll give me another chance to be worthy of your friendship. Daniel. The words hit differently now, knowing what I knew. Not the confident prediction of a privileged boy, but the wistful hope of someone trapped in expectations he lacked. The courage to defy. My phone rang, startling me. Maya's face appeared on the screen. "Finally!" she exclaimed when I answered. "I've been dying for details all day." "I just got home," I said, settling onto my couch. "And I'm still processing." Processing? What? The fact that Daniel Porter has been secretly pining for you for a decade? That he basically reshaped his entire career because of you? Maya, I cut her off. It's not that simple. Of course it's not simple, she agreed. Nothing worthwhile ever is. But come on, Jazz. The guy has been following your career, started a whole investment fund inspired by you, and practically begged for a second chance. That's not nothing. He didn't tell me about prom night, I reminded her. The hurt still raw despite the explanations. He knew what was happening and said nothing. Maya was quiet for a moment. Yeah, that was shitty. But he was what, 18? People do stupid, cowardly things at 18. The question is who he is now. Her words echoed my own thoughts uncomfortably. And who is he now? I asked. You've apparently been chatting with him? We ran into each other exactly once, she clarified. When Mom was getting those tests at Memorial, he recognized me in the cafeteria. I was wearing my scrubs. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. She paused. He asked about you immediately. Wanted to know if you were happy. What did you tell him? That you were successful beyond anyone's wildest dreams. But that I wasn't sure happy was the right word. Her voice softened. Was I wrong? The question lingered between us. Was I happy? I had everything I'd worked for. Professional success, financial security, respect in my industry. But happiness, that was more complicated. I have a good life, I said finally. That's not what I asked. I sighed, staring out at the city lights. I don't know, Maya. I'm fulfilled, challenged, proud of what I've built. But lonely, she finished gently. It's okay to admit it, Jazz. Building walls to protect yourself made sense after what happened. But maybe it's time to consider which walls are still serving you and which are just keeping you isolated. My sister had always seen through my defenses, even when I'd tried to hide my struggles from her. When did you get so wise? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Med school, she quipped. Nothing like sleep deprivation and human suffering to give you perspective. Then, more seriously, so what are you going to do about Daniel? I fingered the business card in my pocket, the one with his personal number written on the back. Nothing, probably. I live here. He lives there. We have complicated history? It's not practical. Practical, Maya repeated. You know, for someone who took such massive risks in business, you're remarkably risk-averse in your personal life. The observation stung because it contained truth. I'd leaped into entrepreneurship with confidence, betting on myself when few, others would. Yet in relationships, I calculated every possible outcome, always erring on the side of self-protection. It's different, I protested. Is it? Or are you just more comfortable risking failure in business because it doesn't touch the deepest parts of you? I was silent, her words hitting too close to home. Look, Maya continued, her voice gentler. I'm not saying you should marry the guy. I'm saying maybe, just maybe, it's worth exploring the connection you clearly still have. See where it leads without overthinking it. After we hung up, I sat with her words, turning them over in my mind. She wasn't entirely wrong. The walls I'd built to protect myself after prom night, after years of being the outsider at Westlake, had served their purpose. They'd allowed me to focus on building my company without distraction, to move through professional spaces without the vulnerability that had once left me exposed to hurt. But those same walls had kept others at a distance, even those who might have been worthy of my trust. Kate had once called me the most successfully lonely person she knew, respected by everyone, genuinely known by almost no one. I pulled out Daniel's card again, studying his handwriting. The gesture itself was old-fashioned in our digital age, a physical artifact, something tangible to consider. My buzzer rang, interrupting my thoughts. The doorman's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Rivera, your dinner delivery is here. I frowned, not remembering ordering anything. Send it up, please. Minutes later, I opened my door to find a delivery person holding a large paper bag from Marcella's, my favorite Italian restaurant in the city. Confused, I signed for it and brought it inside. Inside the bag was a note. Figured you might need dinner after your flight. Your assistant said this was your go-to place. Kate, I smiled, touched by her thoughtfulness. Kate had become something close to a friend over our years working together, one of the few people who'd glimpsed behind my professional facade. As I unpacked the container of pasta pomodoro, indeed my usual order, my phone lit up with another text from Maya. Forgot to mention, Daniel asked specifically about your company's cybersecurity scholarship program for first-gen college students. Said it was exactly what he would have expected from you. Just FYI. I placed my phone face down, trying to focus on my dinner rather than the complications of the weekend. But my mind kept circling back to Daniel, to our conversation at the cafe, to his explanation about prom night, to the apparent attention he'd paid to the less publicized aspects of my work. Monday morning arrived with blessed normalcy. Executive team meeting at 9, investor call at 11, lunch with a potential client. I slipped back into CEO mode with relief, the familiar demands requiring focus that pushed personal dilemmas to the background. You look different, Kate observed, placing a stack of reports on my desk after the executive meeting. Tired from travel? I deflected. No. She studied me with unnerving perception. Something else. Unsettled. She raised an eyebrow. The reunion was that impactful, huh? I sighed, giving in. Let's just say it was more complicated than I anticipated. Daniel? Among other things. I flipped through the reports, trying to signal that I didn't want to discuss it further. Thanks for dinner last night, by the way. That was thoughtful. Kate tilted her head. I didn't send you dinner. I looked up sharply. What? Wasn't me, she confirmed. Though now I feel like a slacker for not thinking of it. If not Kate, then who? The note had specifically mentioned my assistant and my favorite restaurant, information. That wasn't public. As if reading my thoughts, Kate's eyes widened. You don't think… No, I said quickly. He doesn't even know my address. Your assistant might have provided it if he was convincing enough. I made a mental note to have a word with Jared about security protocols. It's probably nothing. A mix-up with the delivery service. Kate clearly didn't believe me, but she let it drop. Whatever you say, boss. By the way, you've got the NGO Council presentation at 2. I've updated the slides with the latest security breach statistics. Thank you. I was grateful for the return to professional matters. The day progressed with comforting predictability, each meeting and conference call pulling me further from the emotional turbulence of the weekend. By late afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself the reunion had been an aberration, a brief detour into the past that need not affect my present. Then my assistant buzzed my office intercom. "Ms. Rivera, there's a call for you on line 2. He says it's personal." My heart rate quickened. Did he give a name? Daniel Porter. Says he's an old friend from high school. I stared at the blinking light on my phone. So much for compartmentalizing. Tell him I'm in a meeting. Should I take a message? I hesitated. No, just, I'll call him back. But I didn't. Not that day, nor the next. The business card with his number remained in my desk drawer, a physical reminder of the choice I was actively avoiding. Meanwhile, work provided the perfect excuse. We were finalizing a major government contract, onboarding 2 significant new clients, and preparing for a cybersecurity conference where I was the keynote speaker. 3 days after the reunion, Kate cornered me in my office after hours. "Okay, enough," she announced, closing my door with uncharacteristic firmness. "You've been distracted all week. The engineering team is walking on eggshells because you snapped at VJ yesterday over a minor code issue. Something's up, and, as your de facto work wife, I demand details." I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion suddenly washing over me. "It's nothing. Nothing doesn't cause you to check your phone 50 times during the Pentagon briefing or stare out the window like you're in a melancholy music video." She sat on the edge of my desk. "It's lover boy from the reunion, isn't it?" "He's not." I stopped myself, realizing I'd fallen into her trap by responding at all. "It's complicated. Most worthwhile things are." She sounded eerily like Maya. "Has he been calling?" "Once." I fiddled with a pen on my desk. "And I think he might have sent dinner to my apartment the night I got back." Kate's eyebrows shot up. "That's either romantically assertive or creepily stalkerish. Which one are we going with?" I hadn't quite decided myself. The gesture was thoughtful, exactly what I'd needed after a long flight, but also presumptuous. How had he known my address? My favorite restaurant? "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me is intrigued. The other part keeps remembering how it felt to stand alone in the rain 10 years ago, realizing I'd been set up. Kate's expression softened. "You never really told me what happened that night." The memory rose unbidden. The careful preparation, the hopeful anticipation, the crushing realization, the long walk home in the rain. For a decade, I'd kept the details vague, too humiliated to articulate the full extent of my naivete. "I received an invitation to prom," I said finally. Handwritten, detailed. It said to meet at Memorial Park at 8 p.m. where a group would be, gathering before heading to the venue together. I swallowed hard. I saved for months to buy a dress, got my hair done at a real salon for the first time ever. My mom took photos of me before I left. Kate listened silently, her usual quips absent. I waited for 2 hours in the gazebo at the park. No one came. Eventually, I called Maya, who was home with my mom. She'd seen social media posts. Everyone was at the country club, the same place we had our reunion. There never was a meeting. At the park, the invitation was fake. I forced a smile. Classic high school prank, right? Jesus, Kate breathed. That's beyond cruel. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation, I continued, the words flowing more freely now. It was realizing how desperately I'd wanted to belong. How easily I'd been fooled because I wanted so badly to believe someone had seen me as worthy of inclusion. And Daniel was behind this? That's the question, isn't it? I twirled the pen between my fingers. He says no, that he knew about it but didn't orchestrate it, that he tried to find me afterward, but I was already gone. I shook my head. Brittany claims otherwise, and you believe... I don't know what to believe anymore. That's the problem. I set the pen down with deliberate control. For 10 years, I've had a clear narrative. They humiliated me. I rose above it. End of story. Now that narrative is complicated. Kate was quiet for a moment, considering. You know, she said finally, in 10 years of working together, I've never seen you uncertain about anything. You make multi-million-dollar decisions without blinking. You face down Fortune 500 CEOs and government officials with absolute confidence. She leaned forward. Maybe it's good for you to sit with uncertainty for once, to not have all the answers. Her observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Certainty had been my shield, in business and in life. Black and white thinking, clear boundaries, defined parameters for success. The gray area Daniel represented was precisely what made him so unsettling. Or, I countered, maybe it's a distraction I don't need. I have a company to run. The company will survive if you take a personal call, Jasmine. Kate stood, straightening, her blazer. Just something to consider. After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness of my office, the city lights coming alive below. The rational CEO part of me knew Kate was right. Quantum Leap wouldn't collapse if I explored a personal connection, yet the prospect filled me with a vulnerability I'd spent years avoiding. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. In New York for meetings tomorrow? Coffee at that place you mentioned on 23rd? Daniel. I stared at the message. How? Had he gotten my personal number? The same way he'd gotten my address and restaurant preference, presumably. He'd done his research, just as I would have in his position. Before I could overthink it, I typed back, 1 p.m., don't be late. The response was immediate. I wouldn't dare. The following day, I found myself scanning the crowded coffee shop with inexplicable nervousness. I'd chosen Ground Rules deliberately, a place frequented by tech professionals and entrepreneurs where a business meeting wouldn't raise eyebrows. Daniel arrived precisely at 1, dressed in a well-cut suit that spoke of quiet money rather than flash. He spotted me immediately, a smile warming his features as he navigated between tables. "You're here?" he said, sliding into the chair opposite mine. I half expected a last-minute cancellation. I considered it, I admitted. I appreciate your honesty. He glanced at the coffee already in front of me. May I? I nodded, and he went to order his own drink. While he was at the counter, I studied him objectively, the confident posture, the easy way he chatted with the barista, the subtle but unmistakable quality of his clothing. Everything about him spoke of privilege, managed with awareness, of someone comfortable in the world because it had always made space for him. So different from my own hard-fought journey. He returned with a simple black coffee. Thank you for meeting. Me. I know you're busy. How did you get my number? I asked without preamble. And my address? And my restaurant preference? Daniel had the grace to look slightly abashed. Your assistant. I told him I was an old friend trying to surprise you. After your trip. He was surprisingly forthcoming. Mental note. Definite security talk with Jared. That's an invasion of privacy, I said, but without real heat. It is, he acknowledged. I'm sorry, He paused, searching for words. I was afraid you'd shut the door completely if I didn't act quickly, that you'd file the reunion under awkward experiences best forgotten and move on. Maybe that would have been sensible. Sensible, yes, but right. His eyes held mine. Jasmine, I've spent 10 years wondering about you, not just professionally, but as a person, who you became, whether you found what you were looking for. And what was I looking for? I challenged. The same thing most of us want, to be seen for who you really are. To matter. He took a sip of his coffee. The difference is, you actually succeeded. You built something that matters, something that's entirely yours. There was no condescension in his tone, only genuine admiration. Still, I maintained my guard. I didn't come to New York just for coffee, he continued when I didn't respond. I have a proposal for you, a professional one, he clarified quickly. My fund is looking to invest in cybersecurity firms focusing on small and medium business protection. Your company is the leader in that space. I raised an eyebrow. You're pitching me? Really? Pitching me? Really? I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement, he corrected. Your company gets additional capital for expansion. My investors get stakes in the industry's most innovative firm. And yes, he admitted with a small smile, it gives us a legitimate reason to stay in contact while we figure out whatever this is. The offer was unexpectedly tempting, not because Quantum Leap needed the investment, but because it offered a structured way to explore the connection between us. Business parameters, clear boundaries, the comfort of professional interaction. I don't mix business and personal, I said carefully. Fair enough. Then consider only the business angle. My fund specifically seeks out companies led by founders from underrepresented backgrounds. Your firm fits our investment thesis perfectly, regardless of our history. I studied him, searching for ulterior motives. Why now? You've known about my company for years, apparently. Because your latest security protocol for small businesses is revolutionary. Because you're positioned for international expansion. Because the timing makes sense. He leaned forward slightly. And yes, because seeing you again reminded me how much I respect your mind. But I would make this pitch even if we'd never met before. The business proposition was sound. Quantum Leap wasn't actively seeking investment, but additional capital would accelerate our expansion plans. And Daniel's fund was respected in the industry. Their backing would open doors with certain clients. Send the proposal to my office, I said finally. I'll have my team review it. Thank you. He hesitated, then added, and what about the personal aspect? Am I allowed to call you sometime, just to talk? The vulnerability in the question caught me off guard. This wasn't the confident, privileged boy I remembered, but a man expressing genuine uncertainty. I'm still processing everything that happened at the reunion, I said honestly. The explanations, the revelations, it's a lot to reconcile with. The narrative I've carried for 10 years. I understand. He nodded, accepting the boundary. For what it's worth, I'm not asking you to forget or excuse what happened. Just to consider that people can change. That I've changed. We finished our coffees discussing safer topics. The cybersecurity industry, New York versus our hometown, mutual acquaintances from Westlake who'd followed surprisingly unpredictable paths. Throughout, I found myself reluctantly engaged by his insights, his self-deprecating humor, his evident knowledge of my field. As we prepared to leave, he handed me a manila envelope. The investment proposal. No pressure, no timeline. Our fingers brushed as I took it, sending an unexpected current through me. I'll have my team look at it. Outside on the busy sidewalk, we paused awkwardly. In another context, this might have been the moment for a kiss on the cheek, a promise to call soon, the tentative beginning of something. Instead, we stood as two professionals concluding a meeting, the weight of our complicated history hovering unspoken between us. It was good to see you, Jasmine, he said finally. You too. To my surprise, I meant it. He offered his hand, a formally respectful gesture. I took it, the brief contact somehow more intimate than the social kiss would have been. Until next time, he said, a question in his eyes. I nodded, neither committing nor refusing. Until next time. As I watched him walk away, I realized I was standing at a crossroads I'd never anticipated. Behind me lay the safety of isolation, of carefully managed expectations, of professional success that required no emotional vulnerability. Ahead stretched an unknown path, one where I might have to reconsider not just who Daniel was, but who I had become in response to that night 10 years ago. Maya's words echoed in my mind. For someone who took such massive risks in business, you're remarkably risk-averse in your personal life. She wasn't wrong. The question was whether I was ready to change that, and whether Daniel Porter was worth the risk. Back at my office, I found Kate waiting with poorly disguised curiosity. "How was lunch?" she asked, making air quotes. "It was coffee," I corrected, placing the manila envelope on my desk. "And it was fine." "Just fine? The guy tracks you down after 10 years, sends mystery dinners to your apartment, flies to New York just to see you, and the meetup was fine?" "He's also proposing a business investment," I said, tapping the envelope. "I need you to have legal and finance review this." Kate picked up the envelope with renewed interest. "Clever, creating a professional reason to stay connected." She studied my expression. "And how do you feel about that?" It was the question I'd been asking myself during the entire cab ride back to the office. How did I feel about maintaining a connection with Daniel? About potentially allowing him back into my life? After all this time? Conflicted, I admitted. Part of me is curious about who he's become. Another part doesn't trust that curiosity. Because of what happened at prom? Because of what happened after? I sat at my desk, centering myself in the familiar environment. I built this life, this company, partly as a response to that humiliation. What if revisiting the past undermines the foundation I've created? Kate considered this. Or what if it strengthens it? What if confronting the past, really confronting it, not just burying it, makes you even more secure in who you've become? Her question resonated uncomfortably. For all my outward success, I'd never fully integrated the frightened, humiliated girl I'd been with the powerful woman I'd become. I'd simply sealed off that part of myself, leaving it unhealed. Maybe, I conceded. Or maybe it's simpler to maintain the status quo. Simpler, sure. Kate shrugged. But when have you ever chosen the simple path, Jasmine? You built a cybersecurity empire from scratch when everyone said it couldn't be done. You took on government contracts that industry giants couldn't handle. You've never been afraid of complexity in business. Why start now in your personal life? As she left with the investment proposal, I turned to the window, looking out at the city that had become my home, a place where I'd reinvented myself far from the shadows of my past. I'd achieved everything I'd set out to accomplish after that. Humiliating prom night. I'd proven my worth beyond any doubt. So why did Daniel's reappearance unsettle me so deeply? Why did the prospect of exploring a connection with him feel more terrifying than any business risk I'd ever taken? Perhaps because business risks only threatened my financial security or professional reputation. Personal vulnerability threatened something far more precious, the carefully constructed identity I'd built to protect myself from ever feeling as exposed as I had that rainy night 10 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "So, any New York coffee date developments I should know about?" I smiled despite myself. My sister's investment in my personal life was equal parts annoying and endearing. "He's proposing a business investment," I wrote back. Her response was immediate. "Smooth move." And nothing. We had coffee. We talked. He left. "Did you agree to see him again?" I hesitated, then typed, not explicitly. 3 dots appeared. As she typed, then, "Jasmine Rivera, for someone so brilliant, you can be remarkably dense. The man is clearly willing to move mountains to reconnect with you. Either tell him to get lost or give him a real chance. This limbo isn't fair to either of you." Maya's directness cut through my circling thoughts. She was right. I was neither embracing the possibility Daniel represented, nor definitively closing the door. I was hovering in between, unwilling to commit to either path. Decision time, I thought. Clarity one way or the other. I pulled out my phone and drafted a text to Daniel. "My team will review your investment proposal. On a personal note, I appreciate your candor about the past. I'm still processing everything, but I'm open to continuing our conversation." I stared at the words for a long moment, my finger hovering over the send button. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I pressed send. His reply came minutes later. Thank you for your consideration, both professional and personal. I'm in New York until Friday. Dinner tomorrow? One simple question, yet it represented so much more. A step toward something I'd spent years avoiding. A willingness to revisit not just my relationship with Daniel, but my relationship with my own past. Yes, I typed back. 7 p.m. I'll send details tomorrow. As I set down my phone, I felt something shift inside me. Not certainty exactly, but openness. Willingness to explore rather than retreat. To see what might be possible when I stopped running from the past and instead faced it directly, not as the girl I had been, but as the woman I had become. Whether that exploration led toward forgiveness, friendship, something more, or simply closure remained to be seen. But for the first time in 10 years, I was ready to find out. I chose the restaurant with strategic precision, upscale enough to establish a certain tone, but not so intimate that it suggested more than I was ready for. Midtown location, excellent food, professional clientele. A place where I'd taken potential. Clients and investors, never personal companions. Neutral territory. Standing in my walk-in closet, I surveyed my options with uncharacteristic indecision. My wardrobe consisted primarily of power suits and formal dresses for industry events, clothes designed to command respect rather than invite connection. Nothing that struck the right balance for this, whatever this was. Not a date, I told myself firmly. A conversation between two adults with shared history. I finally settled on a charcoal silk dress, elegant but understated, with clean lines that projected confidence without trying too hard. Professional with a hint of approachability. I paired it with simple jewelry and subtle makeup, my armor for the evening ahead. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Legal reviewed the investment proposal. Solid terms, legitimate fund, no red flags. Looks like Prince Charming's business game is as strong as his pursuit game. I ignored the commentary and replied, Thanks. Full team review tomorrow. Her response was immediate. Wear the blue dress. The one with the subtle drape. How did she always seem to know what I was thinking? I texted back. Already decided on the charcoal. Playing it safe. Typical. Have fun anyway. As my town car navigated the evening traffic, I mentally prepared, as I would for any high-stakes meeting, anticipating questions, planning responses, establishing boundaries. The ritual calmed me, creating an illusion of control in a situation where I felt uncharacteristically uncertain. Daniel was already waiting when I arrived, standing rather than sitting, checking his watch with subtle anxiety that suggested he'd arrived early. He looked up as I approached, his expression shifting from tension to warm appreciation. Jasmine, he said, the single word carrying more meaning than it should have. Daniel. I extended my hand professionally, establishing distance. He took it briefly, respecting the boundary. The maitre d' led us to a corner table partly shielded by a decorative screen, private without being secluded. Perfect. I'd dined here often enough to have subtle preferential treatment without making special requests. Impressive choice, Daniel commented as we settled in. The chef here trained under Thomas Keller, didn't he? I nodded, surprised he'd recognized the restaurant's pedigree. You know your New York dining scene. I come here regularly for business. The financial district may be downtown, but the real deals happen over midtown dinners. He smiled slightly. Though I've never been seated at quite such a prime table. Minor perks of being a regular, I said with deliberate casualness. Or major perks of being Jasmine Rivera. There was no sarcasm in his tone, only a kind of admiration that made me uncomfortable in its directness. The server appeared, saving me from responding. We ordered drinks. Sparkling water for me, a simple whiskey for him. Another tiny data point. He'd ordered straightforwardly, without the showy connoisseurship many men in his position affected. "So," I began once we were alone again, "did your meetings go well today?" "Small talk. Safe territory." "Productive?" he replied. "Two potential portfolio companies, one existing investment seeking additional funding." He studied me for a moment. "But you didn't agree to dinner to discuss my work schedule." Direct. No pretense. I could respect that approach. "No," I agreed. "I'm still processing everything we discussed at the reunion, and after." "As am I," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "It's not every day you come face to face with someone who's haunted your thoughts for a decade." The word haunted caught me off guard. It implied a depth of impact I hadn't expected him to acknowledge. "That seems dramatic," I deflected. "We barely knew each other in high school." Daniel didn't take the bait. "We knew each other better than you think, better than either of us admitted at the time." Our drinks arrived, providing a momentary reprieve from the conversation's unexpected intensity. I took a sip of water, gathering my thoughts. "What do you want from this, Daniel?" I asked finally. "Honestly, beyond the investment proposal, beyond coffee in New York, what are you hoping will happen?" He considered the question with surprising seriousness, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. The simple answer? I want to know you, the real you, not the version I've pieced together from business journals and secondhand information. I want to understand who you've become and how you got there. And the complicated answer? His eyes met mine directly. I want a chance to be the person I should have been 10 years ago. Someone worthy of your trust. Someone who recognizes your value not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you are. The raw honesty in his response disarmed me. I'd expected platitudes, perhaps, or careful deflection. Not this unvarnished vulnerability. I searched for the right word. Unexpected. 10 years gives you a lot of time to think about what you'd say if you ever got the chance. He took a sip of his whiskey. Your turn. What do you want from this, Jasmine? The question turned the tables uncomfortably. What did I want? I'd been so focused on protecting myself, on maintaining control of the situation, that I hadn't fully examined my own motivations. Clarity, I said finally, about what happened then, about who we are now, about whether there's anything worth exploring beyond our shared history. He nodded, accepting this. Fair enough. We paused as the server returned to take our dinner orders. I chose the sea bass. He ordered the duck. Another small detail cataloged in my ongoing assessment. Tell me something I don't know about you, he said when we were alone again. Something the Forbes profiles and industry interviews don't cover. I considered deflecting, but found myself wanting to offer something genuine in return for his honesty. I still send my mother money every month, but she thinks it's from Maya's scholarships, I said, surprising myself with the admission. She doesn't know about my company, my success. She thinks I work for a tech firm in middle management. Daniel's eyebrows rose. She doesn't know you're a CEO? Why? It was a question I rarely examined too closely. Because it would change things between us. She'd worry about me differently, ask different questions, see me differently. I traced the rim of my water glass, and because part of me is afraid she'd be disappointed somehow. Disappointed? In your success? He looked genuinely confused. In my priorities, my mother values family, community, connection above all else. I've sacrificed those things to build Quantum Leap. I'm not sure she would understand that choice. The admission felt weightier than I'd intended, revealing more about my own conflicted values than I usually acknowledged. Or maybe she'd be prouder than you can imagine, Daniel suggested gently. Not just of your success, but of what you've sacrificed to achieve it. His perception was uncomfortably acute. Before I could respond, our appetizers arrived, a brief reprieve from the deepening conversation. As we sampled our first courses, I steered us toward safer ground. Your turn. Tell me something I don't know about you. Daniel considered this, then said, I've never lived up to my father's expectations, and I finally stopped trying 2 years ago when I left the family firm. He hasn't spoken to me since, except through lawyers. The revelation carried weight beyond the simple words. That must have been difficult, I said, genuinely sympathetic despite myself. Necessary, he corrected. I was becoming someone I didn't respect, focused solely on profit margins, indifferent to the broader impact of our investments. He met my gaze. Watching your career trajectory was part of what inspired me to change course. My career? You? Built something meaningful, not just profitable, but purposeful. Your company actively protects small businesses that larger security firms ignore. Your scholarship program creates opportunity for students like you were. He smiled slightly. You aligned your success with your values. I wanted to do the same. I didn't know how to respond to the implication that I'd inadvertently influenced his life's direction. It added a layer of complexity to our interaction that I hadn't anticipated. I don't know if I consciously aligned success with values, I admitted. I just built something I believed in. Exactly. His smile deepened. That's the point. That's the point. Throughout the main course, our conversation flowed with surprising ease, covering professional achievements, industry challenges, books we'd read recently. I found myself genuinely engaged by his insights, his self-awareness, his ability to listen as intently as he spoke. This was not the Daniel Porter I remembered, or perhaps more accurately, it was a more fully realized version of the person I'd glimpsed beneath the perfect student, the expected success. You mentioned your scholarship program, he said as we finished our entrees. The one for first-generation tech students. How did that start? The question touched on something deeply personal, a project I rarely discussed in detail, even with my executive team. 3 years ago, I began, I was speaking at a tech conference in Chicago. A young woman approached me afterward, Latina, first-generation college student. Brilliant but clearly intimidated by the corporate environment. She reminded me so much of myself at that age. I paused, remembering the encounter vividly. She asked me how I'd overcome the barriers, the lack of connections, the cultural expectations, the subtle biases in the industry. And I realized that, while I could give her advice, what she really needed was opportunity. Access. The same things I'd had to fight for every step of the way. Daniel listened with full attention, no hint of the performative interest I often encountered in professional settings. So I created the scholarship, not just financial support, but mentorship, internships, networking, the things that make the difference between potential and achievement. I smiled slightly. We have 27 scholars now. 3 have already joined Quantum Leap full-time. That's remarkable, Daniel said, and I could tell he meant it. Creating a pathway that didn't exist for you. It's selfish in a way, I admitted. I get to see versions of myself succeed without the same struggles. That's not selfishness, he countered. It's legacy. Impact that extends beyond profit margins or market share. His understanding resonated uncomfortably. Most people saw the scholarship as a standard corporate social responsibility initiative. Daniel had immediately grasped its deeper personal significance. As dessert arrived, a dark chocolate soufflé to share, ordered without consultation, but precisely what I would have chosen, I found myself increasingly confused by my own reactions. I'd come to this dinner guarded, analytical, ready to maintain emotional distance. Instead, I was engaging more genuinely than I had with anyone in years. May I ask you something personal? Daniel ventured as the server poured coffee. I tensed, slightly. You can ask. Why did you keep your success secret from everyone from Westlake? It wasn't just me you avoided. It was everyone from your past. The question hit a nerve I usually protected. I considered deflecting, but something in the evening's candor pushed me toward honesty. Because I wanted to succeed on my own terms, I said carefully. Without their preconceptions, their expectations, their pity? Pity? He looked genuinely puzzled. The scholarship girl, the diversity admission, the charity case. The old labels still carried a sting I'd never fully escaped. I didn't want my achievements viewed through that lens, as exceptional despite my background rather than because of who I am. Understanding dawned in his expression. And now, after the reunion, after everyone knows, I considered the question thoughtfully. Now, I realize it matters less than I thought. Their perception doesn't define my reality. That sounds like freedom, he observed quietly. The insight struck home with unexpected force. In a way, the reunion had freed me, not because I'd proven anything to my former classmates, but because I'd realized their opinions no longer held power over me. I'd been carrying chains I could have dropped years ago. Perhaps it is, I acknowledged, as Zine. The evening drew to a close. I found myself reluctant to end our conversation, a surprising shift from my initial wariness. We had moved beyond rehearsed narratives into territory that felt authentic, if still cautious. Outside the restaurant, the city pulsed with its usual nighttime energy. My driver waited discreetly at the curb. "May I walk you to your car?" Daniel asked, the formal courtesy a reminder of his upbringing. I nodded, and we moved through the evening crowd together, not touching but aware of each other's presence. At the car we paused, the moment weighted with unspoken possibilities. "Thank you for dinner," he said simply. "And for the conversation." "Thank you for your honesty," I replied, meaning it more than I'd expected to. He hesitated, then said, "I'm in New York through tomorrow evening. Would you have time for lunch? Or coffee?" The request hung between us. Not presumptuous, not desperate, just open. A genuine desire for continued connection. 10 years ago, I would have protected myself at all costs, refused any vulnerability. Even a week ago, I might have done the same. But something had shifted, perhaps in him, perhaps in me, perhaps in the space between us where our shared history resided. "Coffee," I decided. "There's a place near my office. I can meet at 10. The smile that crossed his face was genuine, lighting his eyes in a way I remembered from brief moments in high school when the real Daniel had occasionally slipped through, his carefully maintained facade. "I'll be there," he promised. No move to touch me, not even a handshake, respecting the boundaries I'd established without question. As I slid into my car, I found myself wondering if those boundaries were still necessary, or if they had become habitual rather than protective. "Home, Ms. Rivera?" my driver asked. "Yes," I said, watching through the window as Daniel remained on the sidewalk, seeing me off before he turned to hail his own taxi. As the car pulled into traffic, my phone buzzed with messages I'd ignored during dinner. 2 from Maya demanding updates, 1 from Kate with a question about tomorrow's board presentation, and most surprisingly, a text from Brittany Chen. "Jazz, hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your number from the reunion committee. Just wanted to apologize for any awkwardness at the reunion. Ancient history, right? Anyway, I'm in NYC next month for a pharmaceutical conference. Thought maybe we could grab lunch. Would love to hear more about your amazing company." The message oozed insincerity, its exclamation points and forced enthusiasm transparent in their calculation. The old Brittany, recognizing a valuable connection and attempting to capitalize on it. A week ago, I might have ignored the message or sent a polite, but distant response. Now I felt only a bemused detachment. Brittany Chen no longer had the power to hurt me, not because I'd achieved more success than she had, but because I no longer needed her approval or feared her judgment. I replied simply, "Thanks for reaching out. Safe travels to NYC next month. My schedule is quite full, but feel free to contact my office if you're interested in Quantum Leap's pharmaceutical sector security solutions." Professional, bounded, neither hostile nor inviting. As I put my phone away, I realized I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. The past would always be part of me, but perhaps it didn't need to define me any longer. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of wine, trying to process the evening. The Daniel Porter I'd spent time with tonight was not the boy I remembered. Or perhaps, more accurately, he was the man that boy had grown into, shaped by his own choices and regrets. I found myself drawn to my laptop, opening it with a familiar sense of purpose. Within minutes, I was researching Daniel's investment fund beyond the cursory background check I'd done before dinner. Porter Equity Partners had been founded 2 years ago after Daniel's public split from his family's firm. Their investment thesis was precisely as he'd described, focusing on businesses led by founders from underrepresented backgrounds, particularly in technology and sustainable infrastructure. Their portfolio was impressive, 23 companies, most showing strong growth trajectories. Several had female or minority founders who'd struggled to find traditional venture backing. An interview with Daniel in Financial Innovators caught my attention. The headline read, "Breaking with Tradition: How Daniel Porter is Redefining Venture Capital's Approach to Diversity." The interviewer had asked why he'd left his family's prestigious firm to start a fund with a specific focus on underrepresented founders. Daniel's response was thoughtful. The traditional venture model is built on pattern recognition, funding people who look like previous successful founders. That creates a self-reinforcing cycle that excludes extraordinary talent. I've seen brilliant entrepreneurs with game-changing ideas struggle for capital simply because they didn't fit the expected profile. That's not just unfair. It's bad business. We're leaving innovation and returns on the table by maintaining these systemic barriers. Reading his words, I felt an uncomfortable resonance with my own experience. How many doors had been closed to me before I'd proven myself beyond any doubt? How many subtle expectations had I needed to overcome? Further in the interview, Daniel mentioned a specific catalyst for his change in direction. "I watched a former classmate build something remarkable despite every obstacle the system placed in her way. She couldn't get meetings with traditional VCs, so she bootstrapped. She couldn't hire from the right schools, so she built her own talent pipeline. She created success entirely on her own terms, and now she's running circles around companies that initially dismissed her. That opened my eyes to how much potential we're missing by maintaining the status quo." He hadn't named me, but the reference was unmistakable. I'd had no idea he'd been watching my career so closely, or that my journey had influenced his professional evolution. My phone rang, pulling me from my research. Maya's face appeared on the screen. "Finally!" she exclaimed when I answered. "I've been waiting all night. How was dinner with Mr. Harvard Investment Fund?" I settled onto my couch, swirling the wine in my glass. "Surprisingly, good." "Good?" Maya repeated skeptically. "That's the best adjective you can come up with? You, with your fancy business school vocabulary?" I smiled despite myself. "Fine. It was engaging, thought-provoking, unexpectedly genuine." "Now we're talking." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. "Details, please." We talked about the past, about our careers, about the scholarship program. I paused, still processing. He's different than I expected. More self-aware, more authentic. "Of course he is," Maya said matter-of-factly. "People change in 10 years, Jazz. You certainly did." "It's more than that." I struggled to articulate what I'd observed. "It's like he's finally become the person he was always trying to be, like he shed the expectations and performance." "Sounds familiar," she observed pointedly. I ignored the implication. He wants to see me again tomorrow. Coffee. And? Maya prompted when I didn't continue, and I said yes. Her delighted squeal made me hold the phone away from my ear. Progress! The Ice Queen thaws! Don't get ahead of yourself, I warned. It's coffee, not a proposal. Baby steps, she conceded. But I'm counting this as a win. You're actually giving this a chance. Was I? The thought both terrified and intrigued me. For so long, I'd defined myself in opposition to my past. The girl who had risen above rejection and humiliation to build something remarkable. What would it mean to integrate that past rather than simply transcending it? To reconnect with someone who had known me before I became Jasmine Rivera, CEO? Maybe, I admitted. I'm curious about where this might lead. Curious is a start, Maya said, her voice softening. You deserve this exploration, Jazz. Not just professional success, but personal connection. Even if it leads nowhere, the journey might be worth it. After we hung up, I returned to my laptop, but instead of more research, I found myself opening the photo gallery on my phone. Among the business events and rare personal moments was a picture Maya had sent me from the reunion, a candid shot she'd taken of me standing with Daniel on the terrace, both of us in profile, engaged in serious conversation. What struck me was our posture, turned toward each other, focused entirely on our exchange despite the party happening around us. Two people with shared history examining something delicate and complex together. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Thank you for dinner and conversation. Looking forward to coffee tomorrow. Simple, direct. Neither presumptuous nor overly formal. I replied with similar simplicity. Likewise. See you at 10. Setting my phone aside, I moved to the window, looking out at the city that had become my sanctuary. For 10 years, I'd built walls to protect myself from the vulnerability I'd experienced in high school. Those walls had served their purpose, allowing me to focus on creating something meaningful without distraction. But walls that protect also isolate. In fortifying myself against potential hurt, I'd perhaps limited potential connection as well. Coffee. With Daniel tomorrow wasn't a commitment to anything beyond conversation, but it was an acknowledgement that perhaps there was value in revisiting the past with new eyes, not to change what had happened, but to understand how it had shaped us both, for better and worse. The next morning, I woke early, my mind already cycling through the day ahead. Board presentation at 11:30, executive team meeting at 2, client calls throughout the afternoon. The familiar rhythm of professional demands should have centered me, but I found myself unusually distracted. Coffee with Daniel felt significant in ways I couldn't quite articulate. Not because of romantic potential, though I couldn't deny, certain chemistry, but because it represented a bridge between separate parts of myself I'd kept deliberately disconnected. I dressed with careful consideration, a navy suit that projected authority for my board presentation, but paired with a silk blouse in a warmer tone than my usual stark white. Professional, but not unapproachable. An unconscious signal of my shifting mindset, perhaps. The coffee shop I'd suggested was a quiet place near my office, upscale enough to ensure privacy, casual enough for an informal meeting. I arrived precisely at 10, scanning the morning crowd. For Daniel, he was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups. When he saw me, he stood, his smile warming his entire face. I hope you don't mind, he said as I approached. I remembered your coffee order from yesterday. The small gesture, thoughtful, without being presumptuous, caught me off guard. Thank you. As I sat opposite him, I noticed subtle signs of fatigue in his appearance, slight shadows under his eyes, a certain tension in his posture. Late night? He smiled ruefully. Investment committee call with London. Time zones are the bane of international business. I remember those days, I said, before I had enough leverage to insist on reasonable hours. The privilege of success, he acknowledged without resentment. You've earned it. We settled into conversation more easily than I'd expected, continuing threads from the previous evening while introducing new topics. He asked insightful questions about Quantum Leap's technical approach to small business security, demonstrating genuine understanding of the field. I found myself curious about his fund's methodology for identifying promising founders outside traditional networks. We've developed a different evaluation framework, he explained, leaning forward slightly. Traditional VCs overweight certain signals: Ivy League degrees, previous employers, personal connections. We look more closely at problem-solving capacity, resilience metrics, market insight. Resilience metrics? I questioned, intrigued. How founders have navigated previous obstacles, what they've overcome to reach their current position. He met my eyes directly. You'd score extraordinarily high, by the way. The personal observation shifted the conversation's tone subtly. I sipped my coffee, considering my response. Is that why you're proposing to invest in Quantum Leap? Because I fit your resilience profile? Partly, he admitted. But primarily because you've built something genuinely innovative. Your approach to scalable security for small businesses solves a problem other firms have ignored. He paused. The fact that I know you personally is complicated. It creates potential conflicts I've been transparent about with my partners. His candor was refreshing, acknowledging the complexity rather than pretending it didn't exist. I appreciate the transparency, I said. My board will as well, when we review your proposal. And is that what you want? He asked carefully. For our reconnection to remain strictly professional? The question hung between us, direct yet gentle, pressing without demanding. My instinct was to deflect, to maintain the safe distance of business interaction. But something in me resisted that familiar retreat. I don't know, I admitted, the honesty surprising even me. This is uncharted territory. Daniel nodded, accepting the uncertainty without pushing further. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I value the professional connection regardless. Your company is exactly the kind of innovative, purpose-driven business our fund seeks to support. As our coffee, cups emptied, I glanced at my watch. I should go. Board presentation in an hour. Of course. He hesitated, then added, I fly back to Boston tonight. Would it be all right if I called you sometime? Not about the investment proposal, just to talk. The request was modest yet significant, an explicit desire to maintain connection beyond this weekend's serendipitous reunion. 10 years ago, I would have protected myself at all costs. A week ago, I might have done the same. But something had shifted in my understanding of both Daniel and myself. The walls I'd built had served their purpose. Perhaps it was time to see which ones still needed to stand. Yes, I said simply. I'd like that. His smile was worth the momentary vulnerability. Thank you. Outside the coffee shop, we paused awkwardly. This was goodbye, at least for now, the end of our unexpected reunion weekend and the potential beginning of something undefined. Good luck with your board, he said. Safe travels back to Boston, I replied. He extended his hand, a formal gesture that somehow carried more meaning than a casual hug would have. I took it, the brief contact sending an unexpected current through me. As I walked toward my office, I felt strangely lighter. Not because I'd found answers or resolution, but because I'd allowed myself to ask questions I'd avoided for years. To consider possibilities beyond the careful boundaries I'd established. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Board members arriving early, Johnson asking about Q3 projections. Reality intruding. I quickened my pace, shifting mental gears from personal exploration to professional performance. But for once, the transition wasn't a retreat or an escape, simply a movement between equally valid aspects of my life. Perhaps that was the most significant revelation of all. The board meeting proceeded with its usual precision: financial updates, strategic initiatives, market projections. I presented with practiced confidence, fielding questions with the authority I'd earned through years of proven leadership. Before we conclude, I said as we neared the end of the agenda, I'd like to briefly mention an investment proposal we've received from Porter Equity Partners. Our legal and finance teams are reviewing the terms, which appear solid. Full documentation will be circulated before our next meeting. Robert Chen, our most conservative board member, frowned slightly. Porter, isn't that the fund that split from Porter Financial Group recently? The one with the specific diversity focus? Yes, I confirmed. They've established a strong 2-year track record focusing on underrepresented founders in tech and sustainable infrastructure. Any potential conflicts we should be aware of? Asked Diane Menendez, our most detail-oriented member. I maintained professional composure, though the question touched on my recent personal development. The fund's founder, Daniel Porter, was a former classmate. He's disclosed this connection to his investment committee and will include that transparency in our evaluation. After the meeting adjourned, Kate cornered me in my office, her expression alight with curiosity. A former classmate? That's how we're describing Coffee Date Guy now? It's factually accurate, I pointed out, sorting through meeting notes. Kate perched on the edge of my desk. And how was this morning's coffee with your former classmate? I gave her a warning look that had exactly zero effect. Productive. Productive, she repeated skeptically. Is that why you're almost smiling? Because it was productive. Was I smiling? The realization caught me off guard. It was nice, I admitted. Comfortable. Interesting. Kate's expression softened from teasing to genuine interest. You like him? I'm intrigued by who he's become, I corrected, though the distinction felt semantic even to me. And he's flying back to Boston tonight. He asked if he could call me sometimes. I said yes. I tried to keep my tone matter of fact, but something in my voice must have betrayed me. Kate's smile widened. Progress. The Ice Queen thaws. Rolled my eyes at the echo of Maya's words. Don't you have work to do? This is more interesting, she countered. Watching Jasmine Rivera actually consider a personal connection that doesn't involve quarterly deliverables. Her teasing held affection rather than judgment, but it highlighted an uncomfortable truth. I had prioritized professional achievement over personal connection for so long that even small steps toward vulnerability seemed noteworthy to those who knew me best. It's just phone calls, I said, downplaying the significance. Nothing definitive. Yet, Kate added with insufferable confidence. Nothing definitive yet. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of meetings and decisions, the familiar rhythm of leadership both grounding and engaging. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself that the weekend's events, the reunion, the revelations, the reconnection with Daniel, had been a brief deviation from my normal life, rather than a potential turning point. Then my phone buzzed with a text as I was leaving the office. Boarding flight to Boston. Thank you for coffee this morning, and for the possibility of more conversation. Safe in saying this was not how I expected the reunion weekend to unfold. Daniel. I found myself smiling as I typed back, safe travels, and agreed, unexpected, but worthwhile. His response came quickly. Very worthwhile. I'll call you this weekend if that works. It does, I replied simply. As I slipped my phone into my pocket, I caught sight of my reflection in the glass elevator. Doors, the same successful, composed CEO I'd been before the reunion, yet somehow different. Less armored, perhaps. More open to possibility. The reunion had forced me to confront not just my past, but the narrative I'd constructed around it, the story I'd told myself about who I was and why. In reconnecting with Daniel, I'd begun to see how that narrative might be more complex, more nuanced than I'd allowed myself to acknowledge. The quiet scholarship girl and the successful CEO weren't separate identities, but points on a continuum, each informing and enriching the other. Perhaps it was time to integrate them more fully, to recognize that my past had shaped but need not constrain my future. As my car navigated through evening traffic toward my apartment, I found myself contemplating possibilities I hadn't considered in years. Not just professional achievements or company milestones, but personal connections, vulnerability, growth beyond the careful boundaries I'd established. The reunion that I'd approached with such reluctance had become a catalyst. Not for proving anything to former classmates who had once overlooked me, but for reconciling different aspects of myself I'd kept deliberately separate. Whatever developed with Daniel, friendship, something more, or simply closure on our complicated history, the journey had already proven valuable. In confronting my past, I'd discovered new possibilities for my future. In allowing myself to be seen, I'd begun to see myself more clearly. The secrets I'd kept for 10 years had protected me, but perhaps they had limited me as well. In revealing my success, I'd inadvertently revealed something more significant: the capacity for connection I'd denied myself for too long, and that revelation might prove the most transformative of all. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in a sunlit auditorium, looking out at 27 faces filled with a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. The Quantum Leap Scholarship recipients were graduating from our intensive summer program, ready to return to their universities with real-world experience and industry connections that would transform their career trajectories. "What makes this program unique," I said, my voice carrying through the space, "isn't just the financial support or technical training. It's the recognition that talent exists everywhere, but opportunity doesn't. Each of you has demonstrated extraordinary potential. Our job was simply to remove the barriers preventing that potential from being realized." In the front row, Maya sat beside Kate, both beaming with pride. My sister had taken vacation days from her residency program to attend, insisting this ceremony was non-negotiable family business. Behind them, members of my executive team mingled with industry partners and mentors who had contributed to the program. And at the back of the room, standing quietly by the door, was Daniel. He caught my eye briefly, offering a small private smile that still had the power to catch me off guard after months of cautious connection. Weekly phone calls had evolved into regular visits between Boston and New York, each encounter deepening our understanding of who we'd become and what we might mean to each other. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," I continued, focusing on the graduates. "You're joining a community that will support you throughout your careers. The connections you've made here will open doors, but your talent and determination will take you through them." After the formal ceremony concluded, I moved through the crowd, speaking individually with each graduate. Their stories never failed to move me. The community college student who'd taught himself coding while working night shifts, the young woman who'd overcome housing insecurity to maintain a perfect GPA, the first-generation immigrant balancing family obligations with academic excellence. In each of them, I saw echoes of my own journey, but with one crucial difference. They weren't walking the path alone as I had. They had support, mentorship, community. The isolation I'd experienced was something I was determined to spare them. "Ms. Rivera?" A young woman approached, her expression nervous but determined. "Can I ask you something?" Maria Diaz was one of our most promising scholars, brilliant with network security protocols, already developing innovations that had caught our engineering team's attention. "Of course, Maria, and please call me Jasmine." She smiled shakily. "I was wondering, the story you told us on orientation day, about being the scholarship student at a private high school, about feeling like you didn't belong." She hesitated. "How did you overcome that feeling? Because sometimes, even here, even with all this support, I still feel like an imposter." The question resonated deeply. 6 months ago, I might have offered polished advice about confidence and perseverance. Now, I found myself answering with unexpected honesty. I didn't overcome it so much as transform it, I said carefully. For years, I used that feeling of being an outsider as motivation, to prove my worth, to demonstrate that I belonged in spaces that weren't designed for people like me. Maria nodded, recognition in her eyes. But recently, I've realized something important, I continued. That feeling of being different isn't a weakness. It's perspective. It allows you to see opportunities and solutions others miss. The challenge isn't overcoming the feeling of being an outsider. It's recognizing the strength that comes from your unique vantage point. Understanding dawned in her expression. Like how my background in community health informatics helped me identify security vulnerabilities in the medical record system. Exactly. I smiled, genuinely proud of her insight. Your different perspective isn't something to overcome or hide. It's your competitive advantage. As Maria returned to her peers, I felt a presence beside me. Daniel had approached quietly, his expression thoughtful. "That was a good answer," he said. "Better than the usual, fake it till you make it, advice." "Experience is a demanding teacher," I replied. "How long have you been here?" "I caught most of your speech." His eyes held warm appreciation. "You're different with them than you are in business settings. More open, more yourself." The observation might have felt invasive once. Now I recognized its accuracy. They remind me of who I was, who I still am, underneath the CEO persona. I like both versions. His smile held a hint of private meaning. The powerhouse executive and the woman who sees herself in these students. Over the past months, we'd navigated the complex territory between our past and present selves with careful honesty. Weekly calls had become a fixture in my otherwise tightly scheduled life. Conversations that ranged from industry developments to childhood memories, from current challenges to future hopes. Each exchange had built understanding, trust, and something more delicate that neither of us had rushed to label. "I'm glad you could make it," I said, genuine appreciation in my voice. "I know you had that investor meeting in Chicago yesterday. Wouldn't have missed it." He glanced around at the buzzing crowd of graduates. "This program is remarkable, Jasmine. You're changing lives." "We are," I corrected gently. 3 months ago, Porter Equity Partners had become a strategic investor in Quantum Leap, with Daniel recusing himself from the final decision process to avoid conflicts. The investment had accelerated our expansion plans, including doubling the scholarship program's capacity for the coming year. "Ms. Rivera," called one of the graduates, waving me over to meet his parents. "Duty calls," I said to Daniel. "Maya mentioned dinner plans?" 7 o'clock. She's insisting on that Thai place you two used to save up for when you were in college. Smiled at my sister's sentimentality. "See you there." As I moved through the remainder of the reception, introducing graduates to industry contacts, answering parents' questions, and coordinating with my team, I caught occasional glimpses of Daniel engaged in conversation with various attendees. He moved through the space with natural ease, genuinely interested in the students' projects, asking insightful questions about their work. It still surprised me sometimes, this man who had grown from the privileged boy I'd known in high school. His evolution paralleled my own in certain ways, both of us becoming more authentic versions of ourselves beyond the constraints of expectations. Later, as the event wound down, I found myself with a rare, quiet moment. Most attendees had departed, leaving only my team handling final arrangements. I stood by the windows, gazing out at the New York skyline as afternoon light painted the buildings in gold. "Penny for your thoughts?" Maya appeared beside me, slipping, her arm through mine. "Just reflecting," I said, "on how far we've come. How different things might have been." "You mean if you hadn't gone to the reunion?" Maya's perception had always been unnervingly accurate. If you hadn't reconnected with Daniel? If I hadn't confronted the past instead of just running from it, I clarified. The reunion was a catalyst, but the change was already necessary. My sister studied me with the thoughtful gaze that served her well as a physician. You seem happier, Jazz. More whole somehow. The observation touched something. True. I feel more integrated, I acknowledged. Less compartmentalized. And Daniel? She asked carefully. I glanced across the room, where he was engaged in animated conversation with Kate about something that had them both laughing. He's part of that integration, connecting my past and present in ways I didn't expect. Maya smiled, squeezing my arm. I knew it would be good for you, facing those old ghosts. Don't get too smug, I warned, but without heat. It could have gone very differently. But it didn't. Her confidence was absolute. Because underneath all that success and power, you're still you. Still the sister who tutored me through calculus and convinced me I could be a doctor when everyone else said it was too expensive, too competitive, too much. Her words warmed something in me. The recognition that for all my careful reinvention, essential parts of me had remained consistent. The determination, the belief in potential, the desire to create opportunity where it had been lacking. When did you get so wise? I asked, echoing our conversation from months ago. Med school, she quipped back, completing the familiar exchange. Nothing like sleep deprivation and human suffering to give you perspective. Suffering. As we laughed together, Daniel approached, his expression questioning. Everything okay? Just sister stuff, Maya answered. Top secret, very important. Ah, say no more. He held up his hands in mock surrender. I know better than to get between the Rivera sisters. The easy camaraderie between them still surprised me sometimes. How naturally Daniel had integrated into the small circle of people I trusted most. Maya had accepted him with suspicious speed, moving from protective wariness to enthusiastic approval after just 2 meetings. I should check on the catering staff, I said, professional responsibilities reasserting themselves. Make sure everything's wrapped up properly. Already handled, Kate interjected, joining our small group. The team has everything under control. You're officially off duty, boss. See? Even your right-hand woman agrees you deserve a break, Maya said triumphantly. Now let's get out of here before you find some other CEO thing that absolutely cannot wait. As we gathered our belongings and prepared to leave, I found myself watching the 3 of them, my sister, my closest colleague, and Daniel, chatting comfortably as if they'd known each other for years instead of months. A small circle of connection. That would have seemed impossible a year ago, when I'd kept my professional and personal lives rigidly separated. Outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the city in warm light. Maya insisted on taking a photo of the 3 of us, positioning us against the backdrop of the Manhattan skyline. For posterity, she declared. The day Jasmine Rivera officially admitted I was right about something. I admitted no such thing. I protested, but allowed myself to be positioned between Daniel and Kate. As Maya snapped several photos, I felt Daniel's hand settle lightly at the small of my back, a gentle, grounding presence. The casual intimacy would have made me tense months ago. Now it felt natural, a physical manifestation of the trust we'd carefully built. Perfect, Maya announced, reviewing the images on her phone. Even you're actually smiling, Jazz. A real smile. Not your, I'm tolerating this social obligation CEO smile. I don't have different smiles, I objected. You absolutely do, Kate and Daniel said in unison, then exchanged amused glances at their synchronicity. Outnumbered, I muttered, but found myself smiling again despite my mock indignation. We'll meet you at the restaurant, Maya said, checking her watch. Kate promised to show me that new exhibit at the gallery next door first. The transparent. excuse to give Daniel and me some time alone might have embarrassed me once. Now, I simply shook my head at her obvious matchmaking. Subtle, Maya. Very subtle. She grinned unapologetically. Subtlety is overrated. See you at 7. As they departed, Daniel and I found ourselves alone on the sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around us in the rhythm of early evening Manhattan. Walk? He suggested, gesturing toward the small park a few blocks away. I nodded, falling into step beside him. We moved in comfortable silence for a moment, the day's events settling between us. The scholarship ceremony was meaningful, he said finally. Seeing the direct impact of your work. Those students' lives are fundamentally changed because of what you've built. It's the most rewarding part of what I do, I admitted. More than the business success or industry recognition. I could tell. His voice held genuine appreciation. You light up differently when you're mentoring them. It's beautiful to witness. The compliment wasn't about my appearance or achievements, but something deeper, the person beneath the professional exterior. It touched me in ways more conventional. Praise never had. Thank you, I said simply, for seeing that, for understanding why it matters. We reached the small urban park and found a bench in a relatively quiet corner. The space around us hummed with city life. Children playing, dogs walking, people enjoying the pleasant evening. I've been thinking, Daniel said after a moment, his tone shifting to something more deliberate, about our situation. Our situation? I echoed, uncertain of his meaning. The Boston-New York arrangement, the weekends and phone calls, the separate lives that occasionally intersect. My pulse quickened slightly. In our months of reconnection, we'd been careful not to push too quickly, both aware of the complex history and present circumstances that shaped our evolving relationship. What about it? I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite the sudden tension in my shoulders. Daniel turned slightly to face me, his expression serious but warm. Porter Equity is opening a New York office. The board approved it last week. You're expanding? Professional interests temporarily overrode personal implications. We're following our portfolio companies, he explained. Nearly 40% are based in New York now, including our largest investment. A small smile. Which happens to be your company. The information settled between us, its significance layered. And you're telling me this because I've been offered the opportunity to lead the New York office. His eyes held mine steadily. To relocate here permanently. Oh. The syllable contained multitudes. Surprise, anticipation, uncertainty. That's a significant career move. It is, he agreed, with significant personal implications as well. The unspoken question hung between us. What those implications might mean for whatever was developing between us. We'd been cautious about definitions, about expectations, allowing connection to build naturally without forcing labels or commitments. Daniel, I began carefully. I don't want you to make career decisions based on, it's not just about us, he interrupted gently. Though I won't pretend you're not a factor. The New York expansion makes business sense. The opportunity to lead it is professionally compelling. But yes, the prospect of being in the same city as you, of not having to say goodbye every Sunday evening, that matters too. The honesty was disarming. In my professional life, I navigated complex negotiations daily, reading subtexts and managing strategic implications. But in personal territory, I still found myself struggling to balance self-protection with authentic connection. I would like that, I admitted finally, the words feeling both vulnerable and freeing. Having you here, not having to coordinate schedules across cities just to have dinner. His smile deepened, relief evident in his expression. That's very good to hear. But, I continued, needing to be completely honest, I'm still figuring this out, how to balance everything, How to be both the CEO and the person behind that title. I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises, he said quietly. Just possibility. The chance to see where this might lead without the complications of distance. The request was reasonable, measured, respectful of my boundaries. So characteristic of how he'd approached our reconnection from the beginning, patient, attentive, never pushing beyond what I was ready to give. I can offer possibility, I said, the words carrying more significance than their simplicity suggested. Daniel's hand found mine on the bench between us, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture that felt both new and somehow familiar. That's more than enough. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the evening light softening around us. In the distance, the city continued its relentless pace, but here, in this small pocket of quiet, time seemed to slow. There's something else I've been wanting to tell you, I said finally. Something I've been working on. His expression was one of genuine interest. I'm listening. I'm planning to visit my mother next month. To tell her about Quantum Leap, about what I've built. The decision had been forming for weeks, catalyzed by my conversations with the scholarship students and their families. She deserves to know the truth about what I've been doing all these years. Daniel's surprise was evident. That's a big step. It is, I acknowledged. Part of this integration process. Bringing together the different parts of my life I've kept separated. Are you nervous about it? I considered the question honestly. Yes. But it feels necessary, right? Like something I should have done years ago. Would you like company? He offered. Not to intrude on a family moment, but for moral support. The offer touched me unexpectedly. You'd do that? Of course. His certainty was absolute. I'd be honored to meet your mother, to see where Jasmine Rivera began. The prospect of introducing Daniel to my mother, of returning to my hometown not as the defensive, secret-keeping visitor from the reunion, but as my authentic self, with someone who understood both versions of me. It felt like closing a circle, completing a journey I hadn't realized I was on. I'd like that, I said simply. His smile held understanding beyond the words, recognition of what this invitation meant, of the trust it represented. He squeezed my hand gently, the gesture communicating more than words could have. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Gallery closed early. Heading to restaurant now. You two better not be working. I laughed, showing Daniel the message. We should probably head that way. As we rose from the bench, Daniel kept hold of my hand, a small gesture that felt significant in its casualness. Together, we walked toward the restaurant, the evening air warm around us, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. There's Maya now, I said, spotting my sister waiting outside the restaurant. She raised her phone as we approached, snapping a photo before I could object. Evidence, she announced triumphantly, showing us the screen. A candid image of Daniel and me walking hand in hand, both smiling at something I couldn't remember saying. We looked relaxed, connected, happy in a way that seemed almost foreign to me. Delete that, I said automatically. Not a chance, Maya replied, tucking her phone safely away. This is going in the family archives. First documented proof of Jasmine Rivera experiencing actual work-life balance. Work-life balance is a myth perpetuated by lifestyle magazines. I countered, but without my usual conviction. Says the woman who just spent 20 minutes holding hands in the park instead of checking her email, Maya observed with sisterly precision. Daniel laughed, the sound warming something in me. She did check it once, he admitted. Very discreetly while I was looking at that sculpture. Traitor, I muttered, but found myself smiling despite the teasing. Inside the restaurant, a small family-owned Thai place Maya and I had indeed saved. Up for during college, Kate was already waiting, cocktail in hand. Finally, I was about to send a search party. She raised her glass in greeting. Or, more accurately, schedule a conference call to lure Jasmine away from whatever executive crisis she'd invented. I don't invent crises, I protested, sliding into the booth. All three of my companions exchanged knowing glances. The Singapore server migration emergency? Kate suggested. That was legitimate, I insisted. On Valentine's Day? Daniel added quietly, his tone gentle but pointed. I felt a flush creep up my neck. He'd flown in specifically for the holiday, only to spend the evening watching me troubleshoot with our tech team from my living room. Fine, I conceded. I may occasionally use work as a buffer. A shield, Maya corrected. A fortress. A moat with alligators. Wolves, actually, Kate added. The moat has wolves, very fierce ones with MBAs and security clearances. As they laughed together, I felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and affection. These people knew me, not just the successful CEO or the scholarship girl who'd overcome obstacles, but the complicated, sometimes difficult woman between those identities. And somehow, inexplicably, they valued me anyway. Speaking of work, Daniel said, changing the subject with tactful timing, I have some news. Porter Equity is opening a New York office, and I'll be relocating to head it up. Maya's fork clattered against her plate. Seriously? You're moving here? Permanently? That's the plan, he confirmed. We're following our portfolio companies, many of which are based in New York. Including Quantum Leap, Kate noted shrewdly, her gaze flicking between Daniel and me. Including Quantum Leap, he agreed, not hiding the personal implications. Maya practically vibrated with excitement beside me. This is huge! When? How soon? Have you started apartment hunting? Because I know this amazing realtor who— Breathe, Maya, I interrupted, placing a calming hand on her arm. The board just approved it last week. There are still details to work out. But it's happening, she pressed. You'll be in the same city. No more weekend visits and Sunday goodbyes. Daniel's eyes met mine across the table, and something passed between us. An acknowledgement of possibility, of doors opening rather than closing. That's the idea, he said quietly. The conversation shifted to logistics, potential office locations, timeframes, the competitive landscape of Manhattan real estate. The familiar practical considerations created a comfortable framework around the deeper emotional implications none of us directly acknowledged. As dinner progressed, I found myself watching the easy interaction between these three people who had become my inner circle. Kate sharing industry gossip that had Daniel laughing until he nearly choked on his pad thai. Maya recounting a hospital emergency that somehow became a story about our childhood dog's unfortunate encounter with a skunk. Daniel offering insights about Boston's medical research community that genuinely interested my sister. They fit together, these separate pieces of my life. Not perfectly, not without occasional moments of awkwardness or misalignment, but with an underlying harmony I hadn't thought possible. Earth to Jasmine, Maya's voice broke through my reverie. You've been staring at your curry for 5 minutes. What's going on in that CEO brain? I looked up, finding 3 pairs of eyes watching me with varying degrees of concern and curiosity. Just thinking, I said, then added more honestly, about how unexpected all of this is. The 4 of us here, everything that's changed in the past 6 months. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? Kate asked. I considered the question seriously. Good, I decided. Different, but good. Later, as we prepared to leave the restaurant, Maya pulled me aside while Kate and Daniel settled the bill, despite my objections. I'm proud of you, Jazz, she said quietly. For the scholarship program? I thought you might find today's ceremony a bit dull. Not for the program, she interrupted gently. Though that too. I'm proud of you for this. She gestured subtly toward Daniel, for taking the risk, for letting someone in. Her words touched something vulnerable in me. It's still complicated, difficult sometimes. Of course it is, she agreed. Anything worth having usually is. But 6 months ago, you wouldn't have even considered the possibility. Now look at you, holding hands in public, planning visits, to Mom together. I hadn't told her about my decision to finally reveal my success to our mother, but Maya's perception had always been unnervingly accurate. How did you know about that? How did you know? She smiled. Because I know you. Because it's time. Because it's the next logical step in whatever integration process you've been going through since the reunion. Her understanding of my journey, sometimes clearer than my own, reminded me how fortunate I was to have her unwavering support through all my transformations. Thank you, I said simply. For pushing me to go to the reunion, for meddling with Daniel, for seeing me clearly. Maya's eyes widened in mock surprise. Is Jasmine Rivera expressing gratitude for my interference in her carefully controlled life? Quick, someone record this historic moment. I laughed, the tension breaking. Don't push your luck. Outside the restaurant, we parted ways. Maya heading to her apartment downtown, Kate to her place in Brooklyn, leaving Daniel and me to share a car back to my building. In the quiet darkness of the back seat, the city lights created shifting patterns across our faces. Without the buffer of others' conversation, a certain awareness settled between us, of how far we'd come since that rainy reunion night, of how much remained unexplored. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, his voice low. I turned from the window to study his face, the features now familiar after months of gradually deepening connection. That I never imagined this, I admitted. Any of it. The scholarship program succeeding beyond my expectations. You back in my life. This opening up I seem to be doing. Regrets? He asked carefully. No, I said, surprising myself with the certainty. The opposite, actually. It feels right, like pieces fitting together that I didn't realize were meant to connect. His smile in the half-darkness held a warmth that still had the power to disarm me. I like that image. As the car pulled up to my building, a familiar hesitation settled between us. The question of how to end the evening, of boundaries and expectations neither of us had explicitly defined. Would you like to come up? I asked, the words emerging, before I could overthink them. For coffee, or just to talk more about the New York plans? The invitation hung between us, its potential meanings layered beyond the simple words. I'd like that, he said simply. Upstairs, my penthouse felt different with Daniel in it, less like the carefully designed showcase of success I'd created, and more like an actual home. Over the past months, he'd been here several times, each visit adding small memories that softened the space. Philosophical debates over wine on the balcony, quiet Sunday mornings sharing sections of the newspaper, impromptu dinner preparations that left my rarely used kitchen actually looking lived in. Coffee? I offered, slipping off my heels with a relief I didn't bother to hide. Actually, just water is fine. He moved to the windows, taking in the nighttime cityscape with evident appreciation. This view never gets old. I brought 2 glasses of water, joining him by the windows. One of the reasons I bought this place, I admitted. It reminds me how far I've come, what I've built. It's magnificent, he agreed, though I'm beginning to think you might be even more impressive than your view. The compliment might have made me uncomfortable once. Too direct, too personal. Now I found myself smiling, accepting it for the genuine appreciation it represented. Careful, I warned lightly. Maya already thinks you're biased. Oh, I absolutely am, he acknowledged with a laugh, completely unapologetically biased in your favor. Though in this case, I have considerable objective evidence to support my assessment. The easy banter between us had developed naturally, over months of conversation, gradually replacing the careful distance of our early reconnection. This too felt like progress, the ability to be playful rather than perpetually guarded. We moved to the balcony, the mild evening air pleasant around us. Sitting beside each other in the comfortable chairs I'd rarely used before Daniel's visits, we talked about everything and nothing: his plans for the New York office, upcoming features in Quantum Leap's security protocol, Maya's residency challenges, a book we'd both recently read. The conversation flowed without effort, punctuated by comfortable silences that no longer felt like gaps needing to be filled. In this quiet space, with the city spread out before us, the walls I'd built seemed distant, unnecessary. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier," Daniel said after one such pause. "About pieces fitting together, about integration." I turned to look at him, curious where this was leading. "And?" "I've been doing something similar, I think. Reconciling the person I was expected to be with the person I actually am." His gaze was thoughtful. "For years, I followed predetermined paths: the right schools, the right career, the right social circles. Even my rebellions were predictable, confined to acceptable boundaries." I nodded, understanding this pattern all too well. "And now?" "Now, I'm finally making choices based on what matters to me, not what's expected." He turned to face me more directly. "The fund, the New York move, you." The directness of the last word hung between us, not a declaration exactly, but an explicit acknowledgement of the significance our connection held for him. "I matter to you," I said, testing the words. "You do." No hesitation, no qualification. More than I expected, more than I probably have a right to, given our history. The honesty disarmed me, as it had from the beginning of our reconnection. Daniel never hid behind ambiguity or plausible deniability. When he spoke of feelings, of values, of hopes, he did so with a directness that both challenged and invited similar candor. "You matter to me too," I admitted, the words feeling both vulnerable and freeing. "It's complicated and unexpected and sometimes terrifying, but true." His smile deepened, eyes warming with something that made my pulse quicken. "Terrifying." "Huh?" "Completely," I confirmed, smiling despite myself. "You've seen me implement international security protocols without breaking a sweat. This—" I gestured vaguely between us. "This makes me nervous." "Because it's not controllable," he suggested. "Not predictable or quantifiable like business metrics." Exactly. His perception was, as always, uncomfortably accurate. In my professional life, I calculate risks, develop contingency plans, manage variables. But this doesn't work that way, he finished gently. "I know. I've spent months trying to develop the perfect strategic approach to winning your trust, only to discover there isn't one. That what's happening between us can't be engineered or predicted." The admission that he too had struggled with this unpredictability made me feel less alone in my uncertainty. "So what do we do?" Daniel considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "We keep doing what we've been doing, taking small steps, being honest, allowing ourselves to be surprised." He reached across the space between our chairs, offering his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. "And maybe we stop expecting to have everything figured out in advance." I looked at his outstretched hand, then back to his face, patient, hopeful, but without pressure or expectation. In that moment, I recognized something fundamental. The walls I'd built after prom night, after years of feeling like an outsider at Westlake, weren't just protecting me from potential hurt. They were limiting my capacity for connection, for growth, for the messy, unpredictable joy that came with genuine vulnerability. I placed my hand in his, the simple gesture carrying more meaning than any declaration. "Small steps," I agreed. "Though relocating to New York for me seems like a rather large one." His smile held both amusement and affection. For us? He corrected gently. And it's a business decision that happens to have personal benefits. Porter Equity would be expanding to New York regardless. But you wouldn't necessarily be the one leading it, I pointed out. True, he acknowledged. That part's definitely about us, about possibility. The word had become something of a touchstone between us. Not promises or guarantees, but openness to what might develop when we allowed ourselves to explore connection without predetermining its course. As the evening deepened around us, city lights twinkling against the dark sky, we talked about practical matters. When he might move, potential, neighborhoods, how our professional and personal lives might intersect once we were in the same city. There's another piece of integration I've been considering, I said, as the conversation reached a natural pause. The scholarship program. My success. It all traces back to that night at prom, in a way. Daniel's expression grew serious, attentive. How so? The humiliation, the betrayal, it became fuel. Determination to prove my worth, to succeed so definitively that no one could ever make me feel that small again. I looked out at the city, gathering my thoughts. For years I've framed that night as the catalyst, the moment that launched me toward everything I've built. And now? He asked quietly. Now I'm wondering if that's giving it too much power. If I succeeded not because of that hurt, but despite it. I turned back to him. If what I've built isn't rooted in pain at all, but in the strengths I already possessed, determination, intelligence, vision, that would have found expression regardless. Daniel listened with complete attention, considering my words carefully before responding. I think both can be true, he said finally. Painful experiences shape us, channel our energy in particular directions, but they don't create our fundamental capacities. Those were always there. His insight resonated with my own evolving understanding. That's what I'm trying to accept, that my success isn't defined by what I was running from, but by what I was running toward. That it belongs to me, not to the past that motivated it. It absolutely belongs to you, he affirmed. Every bit of it. And recognizing that sounds like the most important integration of all. We fell silent, contemplating the night sky and the illuminated city below. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of peace, not because all questions had been answered, or all wounds healed, but because I was finally allowing myself to exist fully, without the compartmentalization I'd maintained for so long. The scholarship girl from Westlake and the CEO of Quantum Leap weren't separate identities, but parts of a continuous journey. The pain of rejection and the triumph of success weren't opposing forces but intertwined aspects of a single life. And the careful distance I'd maintained from my past wasn't protecting me. It was limiting me in ways I was only now beginning to recognize. Thank you, I said finally. For what? Daniel? Asked genuine curiosity in his voice. For finding me at the reunion. For persisting when I was guarded. For seeing both versions of me and valuing them equally. I squeezed his hand gently. For helping me reconnect with parts of myself I'd been running from for 10 years. His expression softened with an emotion I wasn't quite ready to name. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for seeing who I've become, not just who I was. As the night deepened around us, we remained on the balcony, talking about the future with a cautious hope neither of us had expected 6 months ago. Whatever developed between us, friendship, romance, partnership, would be built on honest recognition of both our shared history and our individual journeys, on acceptance of past mistakes and acknowledgement of present growth. The secret I'd kept for 10 years, my success, my transformation, had ultimately revealed something more valuable than professional achievement. In finally allowing myself to be fully seen, I'd discovered the capacity for connection I'd denied myself for too long. In confronting my past rather than running from it, I'd opened doors to possibilities I hadn't permitted myself to imagine. The high school reunion I'd approached with such reluctance had become a catalyst not for proving anything to former classmates, but for reconciling different aspects of myself I'd kept deliberately separate, for recognizing that true strength came not from walls built against vulnerability, but from the integration of all parts of my journey, the triumphs and the wounds, the professional achievements and the personal growth. And perhaps that was the greatest revelation of all, that the most meaningful success wasn't measured in company valuations or industry accolades, but in the capacity to embrace the full spectrum of who I was and who I might become. Not despite my past, but including it, not in isolation, but in connection. The journey wasn't complete. Integration rarely arrives as a single transformative moment, but unfolds gradually through small, consistent choices. Yet, as I sat beside Daniel on that balcony, the city spread out before us like possibility made manifest. I felt a profound sense of homecoming, not to a place, but to myself, whole and undivided at last. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.